Hey. Right. Pala, fast, fast, fast.
I count him out, I can't.
Okay.
I wanted...
What's up?
Okay, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Go, go, go.
Yeah.
Lock sphere, lock sphere, lock sphere.
Vortex him. He can't move. Confirm.
Ebon bolt. So fake opener, no CDs, right?
Well, I tried to step, I can't step.
It's fine, just cheap shot cheap.
Cheap shot, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, now.
Guys, cheap.
He got me out.
Share. Get spell locked. Reflect.
Thanks for them.
Standing still.
Beam. I'll bash him.
Alright, I can swap sharpness soon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
100.
I'm gonna lock this here. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Reclowning.
Lost in me. I started me to that one.
Reserve shield.
Observer.
Observer, by the way. You wanna go through? Please, son?
Yeah, go through. We got link.
Hitting.
I have temp, by the way. Yeah, nice.
I started up now. You wanna piece it?
I have orb soon. It's up to you guys. I can keep doing damage.
I'm getting my cooldowns back. I'm lost in that.
Okay, now that they're spreading out, I wanna orb on the lock so he switches Earth Shield, and then blind when my orb is almost back, and then we kill the shaman with blind, okay?
Yeah, right.
Okay, orbing on him now so he switches it. Yeah.
Artifacted. Coil.
Can you keep me alive here?
Watch out. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay, I have orb, you can blind. I have orb soon.
He has no shit, man.
Unlock.
Okay.
You want me to do it anyway?
No,
I have thunder armor, he needs to die.
No.
Beamed. Watch out, man.
I'm just landing.
Actually, Mumkin, he will never stop it, by the way, because he knows how we
Yeah, so then he will go because we're doing so.
Drinking. Clanking.
I think about it.
Yeah, okay.
Very hard-hitting.
The Tomb of Sargeras hit me in the feels a little bit and reminded me a little bit of Black Temple, so I was like, you know what, maybe I'll start doing some more PvE content. And,
Well, you know, it was designed for that, right?
What do you mean?
It was designed with that in mind. For Tomb of Sargeras to slightly be reminiscent of Black Temple.
Wait, really?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look at the armor you get. Your tier set, look at the PvP set that we get now. It's basically upgraded versions and recolored and higher pixel count versions of tier 6.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's completely sense.
Yeah, and so they tried to make Tomb of Sargeras in a lot of ways reminiscent to Black Temple. So if you feel that way, they did a good job.
Yeah, true. Okay.
Yeah.
Good job, Blizzard.
Yeah.
So we're going to be doing a top 5 list from, I guess, the 5th to the 1st, and we'll just share our opinions, and you guys can obviously share your opinions in the comments as well. And I guess we'll just jump right into number 5. Asmongold, do you want to start?
It's really actually hard for me to come up with number 5. Number 1 through 4 was easy, but number 5 is much more contentious. I would say that if I had to pick any of them, I would maybe have to say, I know some people might be thinking I'm crazy, but Blackrock Foundry. I really enjoyed Blackrock Foundry. Now, the reason I like Blackrock Foundry is that there were a number of bosses in there that were very, very different. I feel like all the bosses, the way the boss was personified was kind of echoed in the fight, and I think the best example of that is, of course, Blackhand. Even on the mythic version of Blackhand, it wasn't some long, drawn-out 18-minute fight like Imperator was in Highmaul. It was a high-intensity, very hard-hitting, direct, like badass 7-minute fight. And if you stopped paying attention for 5 seconds, you were dead. And I feel like that was one of the biggest things that really made Blackrock Foundry amazing to me, is it really felt like you were going through the Foundry, and the way the instance was set up, the way the bosses were set up, especially from an aesthetic point of view, I really enjoyed Blackrock Foundry. And I ended up doing it on my stream probably 150 times, and I still don't hate it, so it must be pretty good.
I mean, I sadly I didn't rate during Blackrock Foundry, but I've heard that everybody that was in the guild at that time, they loved it. So I can definitely agree with your opinion there. My top 5 though, my number 5 is going to be a little bit weird, and a lot of people are going to think that I'm a little bit crazy and a little bit jumping on the hype train, but I think that my top 5 spot will be Tomb of Sargeras. People will think that it's a little bit weird, but just the fights that I started, I went in the instance, and immediately on the second boss or on the third boss, I already thought, this is really similar to Black Temple. And
well, you should, yeah. That's what we were saying earlier, is it absolutely did. And it's like, if you look at that first boss, I mean, there's a Naga in there. It's just like like Supreme Ward or High Ward or whatever, Nagentis in Black Temple.
Yeah, hard.
It's exactly the same. Yeah, and so did you do the Desolate Host fight?
The Desolate Host.
The green ones.
Yeah, so that's like the engine, right?
Yeah, the Engine of Souls.
Yeah, I wiped on it a lot because people couldn't figure out the right amount of people to enter the Soul Realm.
The Spirit Realm.
Yeah, the Spirit Realm. So I don't know, like tanks were like jumping out of it. And I was like, okay, so we just like died and people didn't go in. It was a little bit of a mess, but at the end, like I really wanted to get that fight done because people said that that fight was actually pretty hard for normal.
It was probably the first actual difficult fight. And, looking back at Black Temple, I mean, of course you have Reliquary of Souls. And the Engine of Souls is pretty much the same model almost as Reliquary of Souls. So it's a direct, almost, comparison between like TOS and Black Temple. And I thought that fight was great. I loved it.
Now that you've done Kill Jaden, I haven't done it yet.
I have.
I wish I would have done it. What sneak peek can you give me? Do you think the fight was really well done?
I think one thing that I really liked about Kill Jaden is that on normal, not a lot was happening, but what did happen was important. And what's happened previously in expansions beforehand is that the last boss on normal mode or LFR mode is just basically the heroic or the mythic boss, and all of their mechanics don't do anything. And I think that in Hellfire Citadel, whenever they made some changes to Archimonde, where they, instead of nerfing his abilities, they straight up removed a few of them from normal mode into going into heroic, not only does it make it feel like you're actually progressing in terms of difficulty because you're dealing with the different mechanics, which kind of transforms the fight and makes it more interesting, but also it kind of preserves some level of severity and importance on the mechanics that are still existing. So even though Kill Jaden didn't have a lot of mechanics on normal mode, the mechanics that he did have were still important, and they still needed to be handled in the proper way. And I think that's definitely a much better way for them to handle, the difference between normal and heroic mode. I think that was probably the best thing about Kill Jaden. Whenever he gets to 40%, he turns into, he disappears, and he has these ads spawn, and then you have to run on top of Illidan, and you have to get a Spectral Sight buff to where you can actually attack the ads, and you can't get healed while you have this buff. So it's just this incredible, it's like complete chaos. And there was an achievement, and it's called Dark Souls, right? And so like, if you ever played Dark Souls, it's just like ridiculously hard. And so was this achievement. So you had to, as soon as the ads spawn, they start casting an ability for 5 seconds, and you can't let them get any of those casts off. So we ended up doing that in a raid today, and that achievement was probably one of the most annoying, most frustrating, and of course with anything that takes a lot of work, also one of the most rewarding things that we've done so far in the tier. So that was really fun to do. Also, like, after you get him out of that phase, he does like this huge, like Kill Jaden does this fury of like 1,000 souls or stars or something, and he just turns blue, and it looks like he's about to summon some kind of Dragon Ball Z like attack that's going to kill everybody. And the way that you have to handle that attack and the way he looks during it, it definitely looks like, oh shit, it's going down. And I think that was probably the coolest thing about the fight. And also, like, because obviously I raid a lot and I do pugs a lot, and so I've already done the fight now probably like 5 or 6 times. So to me, it's like the way that the mechanics work together and how punishing they are or how easy they are to deal with really matters a lot to me. And I feel like Kill Jaden was a very good, probably like one of the best times that they've had in terms of tuning a boss correctly, even for an easier mode. And I'm very glad that they went with that philosophy rather than just watering down all of the mechanics.
That's great. Like, I wish one thing that was kind of like complaining, or not complaining, but like just thinking about it, is that why like all the top guilds, like they cleared everything within, well, for example, in Heroic Mythic Emerald Nightmare, they cleared the whole instance in one day, the Mythic one.
Yes.
And then obviously they improved for Nighthold, and it took like what, a week and a half, almost 2 weeks.
Yeah, Gul'dan didn't die until the second lockout, which I thought was pretty impressive. And so did Helya. Helya took a very long time for most guilds to kill, and that was like a 3-boss raid. It was just so tightly tuned. It was incredible.
I think those end bosses though should last a long time. Like it shouldn't be like, oh, like even the best guilds shouldn't just wipe them within the first week or like second lockout. I think it wouldn't be bad if that boss would stay up till maybe even the third lockout. What I
really liked is in ICC. Remember how they had the buff?
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, I would like to see more of that implemented. And so people like raiding guilds
like
had like this Yeah, exactly, a handicap basically. And raiding guilds would have like, they'd know, okay, in a week or so we're gonna have, or 2 weeks or so we're gonna have another 5% buff, and we're gonna be able to meet that DPS check, or we're gonna be able to meet whatever we're trying to do, and it's gonna be that much easier for us to do. And I feel like that was probably the best way of them handling it. And if you look at the way that like Nighthold and TOV went, Trial of Valor went, the last boss was incredibly difficult, and having some sort of a scaling handicap in that way, I think would motivate guilds to keep moving forward. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of what Artifact Power and Artifact Knowledge has done, is that it's given people a way to kind of progress their character and know that every single week they're going to come in just a little bit more powerful. So I think that was really cool that they made those bosses last a long time, but I'd also really like to see those bosses become progressively easier, which is actually what they did with Gul'dan. They nerfed him a number of times. Emerald Nightmare dying, Emerald Nightmare being cleared so early, I think was mostly because of probably Titan Forging and Legendaries. And I think they had already admitted that they hadn't tuned the fight around Shadow Priest using, what was it, Surrender to Madness, and that's why Xavius died so fast.
Shadow Priest, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they had like a very stacked comp for Xavius, and that's why Mythic Xavius died to Exorcist, which was the world first, in something like under 20 pulls. It was incredible. And all the other guilds, it was the exact same because of the way the dream mechanic worked in conjunction with Surrender to Madness.
Yeah, it was insane. One more thing that I want to talk about, Tomb of Sargeras, is, did you see the room of the Mistress Sazin?
That was the first time. Actually, it's funny that you say that, because that was the first time that I actually did like, Alt-Z, and I removed my UI so I could just look around and take it in. It was actually so amazing. And I thought like one of the best things, and that's why I was thinking about putting Tomb of Sargeras as my number 5 too, is one of the best things about Tomb of Sargeras is that there is such a gradation and such disparity between the different environments that you're fighting in, right? So the first one, you're initially fighting in like a shattered cathedral, and then you go and you're fighting underwater, and then you're fighting in like this like pit of lava against the Avatar of Sargeras, and then you end the fight on a spaceship. You're fighting Kill Jaden on a spaceship.
Oh man.
It's like you're everywhere, and it's only one raid. And I mean, comparing that to Emerald Nightmare, I mean, even though I guess like you did teleport around, but everything looked the same.
Refreshing.
Yeah, it's so refreshing. Like you don't feel like you don't feel like you're trudging through the raid. Like, oh, okay, all right, next boss. It always feels like you're doing something different, and I feel like that's something that they did incredibly well in TOS.
That's I wonder if in Mythic the floor will just like not become solid.
Yeah, you're gonna have to swim. That'll be the worst mechanic ever.
Actually, would be really annoying. I was thinking about
it'd be horrible.
It's like maybe not, but
exactly.
That's what I think is gonna be my
All right.
number 2 to Mr. Jarrus. Hopefully, Mythic blows me away. I really want to get back into raiding, so I might be able to check out those fights myself. But enough with number 5. Let's go with number 4. Asmongold, what do you think?
Icecrown Citadel.
Okay.
ICC.
It's also in my top 5, a little bit higher, but like, okay, I want to hear what's up with your, why you put it at number 4.
ICC was a great raid for a number of reasons. Obviously, probably the biggest reason that separates ICC from really any raid that we've had before or after it is the significance and the lore in the game. People, like my dad, knows who the Lich King is, okay? Everybody knows who the Lich King is.
Dude,
like, it was...
Little side story. When I was in Copenhagen with Swifty, we were playing poker at a casino in Denmark, and one of the guys next to us, he like whenever we were just like praying for fun, and then like 30 minutes in, it's like, oh, I know who you guys are. I was like, oh, really? And then like he like lifts up his sleeve, and there's a tattoo of the Lich King. I was like, oh, that's
what
so
the
sick.
Oh my god, that's amazing. That's what I'm saying, dude. I mean, of course, everybody knows who the Lich King is. That's awesome, and I bet there's tons of other people that are the exact same. Like, that was the raid that was the culmination of 10 years of lore. The most iconic story of World of Warcraft ended in that raid. That was whenever subscribers were the absolute highest. I feel like the way that they did the ICC buff made people just want to go into ICC and see how big, how big a damage they could do. You know, like, oh wow, I wonder if I can crit for like 20k, or I wonder if I can crit for 30k, or something like that. So it kind of made people feel like they were more powerful in there, obviously because they were. On top of that, I felt like the bosses were tuned in a way that was more rewarding to kill them. Ever since ICC and going into Cataclysm, I feel like there's been at least a small degree of ability bloat, where before that in ICC, you didn't really need a lot of DBM or boss mods or anything like that. You could just go into the raid and you could understand a few mechanics, and what was really important is being able to execute your DPS rotation and be able to play your character to a very high degree. And I feel like being able to just beat those really, really hard DPS check bosses like Sarfang, Festerguts, Professor Futureside to an extent, those are some of the main ones. Being able to beat those fights just by having the sheer badass DPS, I feel just made people feel like they were awesome. Like, oh wow, we finally did this. And I feel like that was one of the biggest reasons that I like the raid a lot. Also, the way that it was released in Wings, I feel like kind of drug out the hype for the raid, and I thought that was a good way of kind of handling it and allowing people to process different parts of the raid at the same time. And just as the expansion progressed, I mean, you remember, like, ICC was out for like nine months or something. You would still have people at month 8 or 9 really pushing and going for killing the Lich King, and having the buffs and making fights that were simple to understand, but also like the DPS rotations and having to beat like these DPS checks, they were not overly complex. I think that's really what I'm trying to get at, and I feel like some of the raids now are a little bit overly complex, and ICC I think was the best point before all of that happened. So I think that was one of the big reasons why the game was so popular and so successful then. Yeah. So just all of those things coming together is why I think ICC was a great raid.
Yeah, it had a combination of like, it had some freebie bosses there, like the gunship, and it also had the which one was it, Ysera, right? Or was it
Ysera was a joke, Rotface was a joke, obviously Gunship was a joke. Yeah, but Blood Queen, out of all like the end bosses besides Starfang, Blood Queen was extremely
so fun.
easy.
If you got bit
it
first,
was awesome.
Oh,
you got the bug.
You're doing so much damage.
Bite me first. Bite me first. Yeah.
I know.
Exactly.
Like, when we were first trying to kill the boss, we were just really, really hoping it would bit one of the warlocks, because I think warlocks were doing an insane amount of DPS back in the day.
Yeah.
So every time like the warlock got bit first, when we were trying to kill, a heroic, we were like, okay, this is it. The warlock got bit first. Yeah. We got the DPS. Everybody focus. Like, it was
focus up. All right, get your potions. Get ready. Yeah, exactly. We had the exact same thing in our guild too. What
about Lich King? Were you able to kill him at a reasonable pace? Did you get a server first?
Oh, absolutely not. At that point, at the beginning, whenever Lich King came out, my guild was in complete disarray. They had fallen apart, and I was just pugging. I was pugging in like my friend's shitty guild that could barely kill Sarfang, even whenever Lich King was out. And I don't think they ever even killed normal Lich King before Cataclysm came out. It was absolutely awful. And it's actually like a really cool story. Another reason why I think Lich King was one of my favorites is it was like probably one of the coolest points in time for me as a player, because like my old guild came back together at Lich King, and we came back together and we fucking killed Heroic Lich King. And that was the best feeling ever. It was with the 30% buff. I don't care. It was just because we got together and we came back, and just that feeling of community and everything. And like that moment, whenever you finally zone into the Frozen Throne after 45 seconds, because everybody's computers were shitty then, loading screens took forever. You finally zoned in there and you were like, oh my god, I'm here. And it was so cool.
Yeah, the first time I got to the Lich King room, I was pretty much like, damn, we made it. I was like,
we've made it.
We out here, and like we're just like,
yeah, exactly.
You could like see.
Started from the bottom, now we here. Exactly.
Oh, we did. I got the round first on Lich King, and
wow,
it was insane. We did 430 attempts. What? And then we killed him. Yeah.
What?
430.
Oh my god.
I remember that number exactly, because he had like 50 attempts a week or something like that, right?
Yes.
So like I remember we killed him in like the week 9 or something, and it was like literally running out of attempts like the whole night and day. I think I have it recorded somewhere. It's like 1080p, and I actually got robbed from the Invincible mount. Despite all that, I think that instance was amazing, and
yeah, it should definitely speak well.
I guess whenever my Lich King comes, I mean, mine is top 3, but I mean, we talked a lot about ICC. So
yeah. All right, so what's your top 4? Then?
So my top 4 is actually Sunwell, and
okay.
Sunwell was one of the first raids that I thought, wow, we're hitting these blocks, and we have to persevere as a guild to not break up and keep going, because I don't know, like we both like hard fights, right? We both like being challenged, and
that guild that I told you about, they came together in ICC, broke up because of Sunwell. Yeah, so I get it. Don't worry,
dude. Like when I was doing Brutalos, was it straight up DPS check, and I think some of us were completely failing. We were so close, and then and I don't know, like the feel. I still remember the feeling of just like stressing out, and it's like, dude, 10 seconds till end rage, just full DPS, and like
taunt him to the other side of the room.
Double taunt and stuff.
Spread out.
that was like one of the best feelings, and even though like we wiped a lot, and even though it was challenging, and even though it was stressful, I think those fights made themselves into something special. Like, oh my god, do you remember Maru?
I didn't do it on progression. I only did up to Felmist, and after that I didn't do it until level 80. But I've heard stories.
Dude,
I've heard a lot of stories.
We got stuck at Maru and couldn't keep going.
Yeah, it was incredibly hard, apparently.
Yeah, it was insanely hard. Like, I'm trying to remember the mechanics of Maru's, but it was something related to the portals and darkness and.
Well, you'd have to damage down Muru, and then he'd be summoning these ads that would, of course, one-shot you if they hit you, and you had to be meeting all of these DPS checks for the ads. Then you finally kill Muru, which was hard enough, and then surprise bitch Entropus is out, which is its dark matter form, and you have all of this AoE damage going out, all of this other stuff going out, and you had, I think, these other like large dark ads that you had to off tank or something, and it was just incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it was a tough fight, but
yeah,
I think that all in all, I think that fight was challenging, and like for the people, like I think only 5 guilds in the world managed to kill him pre-nerf, and dude, those guilds were like, I think it was like Insidia. What was it, Insidia, or was
like Insidia, SK Gaming, probably like Paragon. Dude, I don't even know who was left.
SK Gaming was actually a guild.
Damn. SK Gaming. Remember that? Yeah.
That was sick. And now they're a freaking huge organization. Well, I mean, obviously Method is too nowadays.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Method's been around forever. yeah, a lot of those guilds now, it's crazy to look back and see like what they've kind of transformed into.
Yeah, see, like, kids, WoW makes you into something better in real life too.
Yeah, it makes you an entrepreneur, obviously.
Yeah, entrepreneur. You know that.
Yeah.
A little bit of side topic. You know that people, I think like one of the top management people said that it made them what they were thanks to being a guild leader in World of Warcraft.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that have had that same experience. Absolutely. I mean, because you're dealing with people, and whenever you're at work, you can always, like, people kind of have to be there because they have a paycheck relying on it. But whenever you're just like running a guild, it's a volunteer army. So what you learn there, in a lot of ways, is how to motivate people and how to make people want to show up, how to make people want to perform. And I think that's something that really, like, you don't really, obviously you have to do it at work, but if you don't do it in Warcraft and you just treat people like shit, you're not going to have a guild at all. It's not like you're going to be like, oh, this guy's kind of an asshole. No, you're not going to have a guild at all. And I think there's a lot of different things like that, and just managing all those different weird personalities and like those conflicts and everything, especially growing up doing it. You know, I was doing that whenever I was 16, 17 years old. So, I mean, here I am 10 years later. I mean, I've got a lot of experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that people can transform that into a lot of real life, I guess, like, they can apply that in real life. Yeah.
And well, like a short thing to end the Sunwell part.
Yeah.
I think Kil'jaeden. So let's just talk about Kil'jaeden. Kil'jaeden fight was actually really entertaining. And the fact that it dropped the legendary bow was pretty sick.
I thought but you remember the legendary bow wasn't even good.
I know. People took it as a stat stick.
Yeah, it was. They just would have it because then you could use it and you wouldn't have to use your arrows. So you'd never die on trash because you could feign death on trash or bosses. So you just make money through raiding, because back then it wasn't like, oh wow, I'll just do some world quests and or buy a WoW token. I've got 100,000 gold. No, like you were out there doing your dailies in the Isle of Qualdanish, just like all the other plebs. You know, if you want to make your 50 gold for the day.
Dude, I remember that. I think that there was a darkness of 1,000 souls, and then like, if you didn't kick that ability, it would just like wipe the whole raid. So like, we would get so mad.
That's the ability he does in TOS. That's the name, Darkness of 1,000 Souls.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
You know that the first person who got the legendary bow was a rogue.
Rogue.
I remember
yes.
that.
Yes,
because
of course.
They didn't have a hunter in the raid. So
yeah, it was something like that. I thought that was hilarious. I remember whenever I got mine, I was like really happy, and I just go around to like target dummies. I just shoot the target dummies.
Did you actually get it in Burning Crusade?
No, I got it in like Wrath of the Witch King.
Oh, okay. I was like, damn,
Yeah.
what a baller.
No, back then I was like, I was kind of an idiot, honestly. So I was mostly just a PvPer back then. You know, I would just PvP and do battlegrounds, maybe do some arena. So I didn't really take it all that seriously, and like I didn't really start raiding. Like it's actually kind of funny, but my first boss that I did, like besides like Karazhan or something, in Burning Crusade was Brutalis pre-nerf.
Oh really?
Like I never had been in Sunwell, or sorry, not Sunwell. Oh, any of the other Sunwell bosses. I've never been in Black Temple, Hyjal, or any of that. And I just got invited in because they needed an arms warrior because they provided a good buff, and they're like, hey, you're an arms warrior, let's go. And so that was how I got into raiding. I was the right spec at the right time.
Damn. Talk about opportunity.
Exactly.
Oh, another thing real quick. The weapons in Sunwell looked amazing. The aesthetics.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh my god. I remember there was Arshan's Gavel or something like that. It was like
yes.
Like caster dagger. I think
yeah.
Well,
no, it was the mace, and it was item level 164, and I believe it was from Kil'jaeden.
Oh my god, the aesthetics were beautiful. The bow looked amazing.
Yeah, Thor Dial, and then the golden bow of Quathalas from the Iridar twins. Like both of those bows looked absolutely incredible.
That was like one of the most beautiful.
Yeah, they were like very like ornate and like well designed, and it just fit the whole theme of it being kind of the Blood Elf city.
Yeah.
And I really like that, where the armor and the weapons kind of matched the raid. You know, even like in TOT, it was the same thing with like warriors. You had like a Mogu armor set, which was like I think pretty much any warrior would agree with me here. It was terrible. It was the worst thing ever. But that's what it should have been. Like maybe they could have done it a little bit better, maybe not. But I really like whenever the armor kind of matches the raid in some ways. Not all the time, but sometimes whenever you have like a cool theme going on, like the Sunwell theme with like the the high elves or the blood elves, you can make some really awesome armor sets. I mean, you remember like the plate armor sets from there were amazing.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we got done with some of our top 4s, time to go to the top 3. What do you think?
Launch. All right. Karazhan. Karazhan, absolutely. Karazhan.
Karazhan is one of them.
It was a 10-man.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was a 10-man raid. But I remember, like, Karazhan, unlike Blackrock Foundry, I remember towards the end of Burning Crusade, if somebody said Karazhan, I would get sick. Literally. I would get sick. And I remember this very clearly, is I would have 2 really, really crappy office chairs. And I would lay down on wipes to that boss Netherspite, the one with the portals that would like channel onto the boss. And I never understood. Yeah, I never understood that fight for like a year later. And I was still doing it on progression. I was just hoping, oh god, I hope they don't tell me what to do, And I would lay down and I would take like 3-minute, because of course, or like probably more like 10-minute. Like little power naps in between our wipes because it was we were up until like 3 or 4 a.m. So Karazhan absolutely was probably one of the best raids, maybe from a partial nostalgic value, but also, I mean, obviously it was good enough for them to redo it for 7.1. So of course it's a good raid. It just felt like Karazhan, the way that it flowed together and the way that it came together, it was just good. And I feel like it was probably... It's like the people that made that raid really cared about the game and they loved the game. And I think that came across so clearly whenever you played through the raid.
I'm going to ask the question that matters.
Yeah.
Did you get the mount?
Which one?
From the Headless Horseman.
Oh, you mean the Attunement Huntsman?
Yeah.
During Burning Crusade? No. During Wrath of the Lich King, I think I got it. I have it now. Of course I have it now. I have like 400 and something mounts.
Oh
but
God.
Yeah, I don't have a life. So like I have very good memories of Karazhan. I did get the mount, and that mount actually, by the way, fun fact, I don't know if they changed it, but it used to be one of the rarest drop mounts in the game because most other mounts were 1% drop. Yeah, I mean Ashes of Var actually was a 2-3% drop, but most like Invincible now or Mimron Ted are a 1% drop. What is it? The Midnight's, the Reigns, I forgot what it's called, Midnight's Reigns or something like that.
Yeah.
The drop rate on that is 0.25, so it's extremely rare. Yeah, like I was farming that as soon as I could at level 80 because I knew that I was like, man, if I want to get this in the next decade, I better start farming it right now. So I was going in on that with every single character until I finally got it, and I was very, very happy. Like as soon as I got it, like this is the same thing. Like we had this inside joke with my guild, where as soon as somebody got the mount, we would all have a macro, and it would mount up with the mount, of course, and then it would say, "Come midnight, let's disperse this petty rabble," because that was like what Attunement would say, and it was just so dumb and goofy and cringy, but it's like whenever you're a bunch of dumb, goofy, cringy guys, it's hilarious, right?
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, I mean, I had a lot of really good memories of Karazhan. I remember wiping in Karazhan whenever I was in tier 6 gear. I remember wiping Karazhan in tier 5 gear, tier 4 gear. I spent a lot of time in Karazhan, and I think that the way that the fight was created, I feel like the raid was created, I feel like probably was one of the best raids that they've ever made.
What was the fight called? The theater? Was it
chess event? Or are you talking about opera event?
The opera event. I think the opera
Yeah.
event was so like it was actually it was kind of fun. Like just like throughout what's it called? Burning Crusade, because every time like even if you like went there with ults, like I don't think like that was one of the fights that you got tired of. You're just chilling, just watching the event pass by, and like I don't know, see what you got, I guess.
Yeah, I remember not knowing what I like a lot of the funny stories that I have from Burning Crusade stem from, wow, I did this thing and I had no idea what to expect and I messed it up and everybody got mad. And that's basically what it was with the opera event as well. Like I was just like, no, the wolf. I'm like, the wolf's running away. I ain't running away from the wolf. I'll beat his ass right now. And then I die, of course. And they're like, oh, what happened? Like, oh, why'd you die, idiot?
Fun fact, I was a tank during Burning Crusade. I was a warrior tank.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was main tanking for my guild until Serpent's Rank Cavern, and then I switched to a druid.
It was a pretty good time to do it, actually. That was back whenever warriors like really kind of fell behind. Paladins.
It was really annoying. Pally tanks were just dominating everything.
They're just better. Okay,
yeah, I know.
That's really all it was.
They really were.
Yeah, I leveled 1 in Burning Crusade, and it was the greatest time I ever had. It's like playing, like that Power Glove from the original Nintendo that was supposed to like give you like all. Yeah, it's like playing WoW with the Power Glove, like you just, oh yeah, I've got this under control. Oh, ads? Oh, okay, let me just consecrate an Avenger's Shield. What, do you think I was gonna die?
And you didn't lose aggro, just were so powerful. Pallies were so good for Serpent.
Yeah, you're just AoE tanking. It's incredible. Like I loved it. I loved the whole idea of like having to use spell power as a paladin, and like I don't know, I just really liked. I haven't thought about this in years, but I just really liked the whole like kind of the paradigm of paladin tanking in Burning Crusade, where you use spell power and you'd have like the special spell power sword, and you were kind of using the light to hold aggro on your enemies, and you had like exorcism and holy wrath and all kinds of stuff. Like that was always really cool to me. I feel like the paladin aesthetic was really, really strong then.
Yeah. Agreed. So, my top 3, I think we already discussed a lot. Like I was saying before, is Ice Crown Citadel. Even though I got ninja'd the horse mount from Lich King.
Yeah.
I think the Professor Preacher side fight was insanely fun. Like I guess like the fact that you had to control like an ooze or whatever, and like you had to make sure that you didn't like towards the I'm talking right now about the heroic mode. Like in the heroic mode, you had a part where ooze like some vomit or like just like some acid would come on the ground, and then you had to like place it properly so you wouldn't so you would have some room, and then like if you didn't meet the DPS requirement or if you were really close, the whole room would be literally a pool, and then like people were just trying to find spots to just like DPS it.
You have the whole raid backpedaling all into the same little corner.
Yeah. It was like, okay, this is it. If he throws up or whatever, or if the pool comes to us, this is it. We gotta push, and I think all the fights had really fun components. I think the Blood Queen was really fun with the biting mechanic. I think the gunship was pretty much like a break from all the progression. Okay, we got 20 minutes break, or we got like a 10-minute chill fight. We can eat while we DPS this boss or whatever.
Yeah, just chilling.
Yeah, and then the Sourfang one was a DPS check. wasn't all too hard.
My legend begins
I think
now.
Which one was also really cool. I guess what was the name of the second boss? It was not
Lady Death Whisper.
Yeah, Lady Death Whisper was actually really annoying in heroic with all the debuffs, and like if you got locked out,
Curse of Torpor.
Yeah, if you got locked out, and then like your DPS would just like go down, so you really relied on the.
All right, guys, I'm gonna jump around for 10 seconds.
Yeah, you just see yourself. Like I don't know about you, but like I look at the DPS charts a lot, and like I pride myself into.
Oh yes.
into you gotta show them who's the boss, right? So
that's right.
Whenever you got that and you messed up or you didn't get dispelled, your DPS would just go down the drain. It's like, oh come on. But
yeah, and you're like, exactly.
The Lich King fight is like the icing to the cake. I think that fight, even though we had to wipe a lot. I didn't mind the wiping, I guess. Like I think that my mentality is obviously the more you like the harder the fights are, the more rewarding it feels when you kill it. So killing, for example, Lich King after 430 attempts, like oh my god, I remember the screaming of the guild still. It was an awesome feeling. So yeah, And that and all the things we talked in the past makes Ice Crown Citadel for me number 3.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was a great raid. I mean, that was where the most people ever were playing the game, and you know, they definitely didn't miss anything good. You know, I mean, I guess they did later on, but I mean, for the raid, you know, they were there for probably one of the best parts.
Oh my god, I still remember the pugs, and then like they would just do up to the gunship, and then they would just stop.
All right, we're done.
Yeah, because,
we're done.
Because Sourfang still required a DPS check even in normal. So if you were just running with a bunch of ults and like awful gear and didn't know what to do, you still would wipe on that because the tank.
Well, you had like this healing thing you had to do. Like whenever he reached 100 energy, he'd put a dot on a random player in the raid that you just couldn't get rid of it. It was just like kind of a softened raid because the dot.
So the healers would go
Yeah, so the healers would go and then you had like the ads that would spawn. So you had the CC and like damage the ads, because if you don't, then the ads would go to you and then they'd kill you, and every single time the ad would melee, then the boss would get more energy, and then also the boss put a debuff on the tanks, so the tanks had to swap back and forth, and so if the tanks were dumb, then you probably wouldn't kill Starfang either, because then you get more energy. Like, it was, and that was it, by the way, that was the whole fight. There were like really no other mechanics, but those mechanics, you better not do them wrong.
Exactly, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Oh, like, I don't know, like, all in all, ICC number 3, pretty good for
Absolutely.
me. All right, number 2, we're getting to the top 2 and top 1.
Number 2.
What was your top 2?
Throne of Thunder.
Okay, that's another
Throne
one
of
that I
Thunder.
can't really contribute much, but I think I did it just like in normal mode once. But like, tell me why is Throne of Thunder number 2 for you?
In a lot of ways, one of the reasons why I like Throne of Thunder is one of the reasons why I was saying I like TOS a lot, is there was so much different changes of scenery in the raid. The first 3 bosses were troll bosses. The other bosses were kind of like these weird, like the next 2 bosses was like a turtle, and then there's this weird Hydra. Then you went up into this like Avery, and then you were fighting this big bird. Then you started fighting these like weird creatures that were kind of like you know, like experiments. Then you went up, you fought Iron Quan, who was just standing there. And then finally you would end up fighting Li Xin on like the Thunder, you know, the Thunder King's like platform. And obviously if you did it on heroic, you'd be able to fight Ra Din, who was the Titan Keeper that Li Xin had overpowered and, you know, imprisoned down there at the bottom. And all of that, it just felt like the raid, you were progressing through almost an entire zone with your raid group rather than just progressing through like an instanced area. And I feel like that was what was really cool about it. Also, there were a lot of other things that kind of made the raid compelling. So obviously it had a number of different like transmog items that were very rare drops from the bosses. And each of those items, like the Great Sword of 1,000 Hells, there was like the bow wrist, the polearm, there was a really big mace, like this giant like 2-handed mace that was a caster weapon. And back then, like now paladins have a 2-handed mace, it's a caster weapon, but back then that really wasn't a thing, and that hadn't been a thing ever since like vanilla WoW. So having that, something like Incanters or Enchanters, something like that, anyway, it doesn't matter what the name is. They were really rare items that you would go back, even now, people go back and farm those items. And so people were still going back and doing it for those items. Also, of course, it drops the 2 mounts, the Swan of Horadon and Ji-Kun. And it also drops a number of different pets. And all these other, like, you know, tertiary and secondary rewards that you can get out of the raid that keeps it relevant for so long after it actually, you know, is no longer useful for gear, for actual progression. And I think that's one of the big reasons why Throne of Thunder was such a great raid, is that it had all these other cool things that you could get out of it. And the raid itself, all of the bosses I thought were really good. Some of them I thought were incredibly annoying. Like, I didn't like the council fight, the 3rd one. I didn't like that one at all. There were a few other ones I didn't like. And Warriors at that point were in probably one of the worst spots that they've ever been in, and I still enjoyed the fight. Li Xin as an end boss, like a heroic end boss, was probably one of the most rewarding bosses to kill because of just how many mechanics you had to deal with, how many times if one person was dumb, the whole raid was over, and all of those things coming together, I think really made Throne of Thunder an incredible raid. You know, mechanics were right, the gear was cool for the most part, minus Warriors basically. There's there was the pets, the mounts, and all of these other things that you can get out of it that really made it unique. And I think that's really why Throne of Thunder was probably one of my second favorite raid.
Like, hearing you talk about it kind of makes me sad I didn't really give it a try. That was like one of the times that I was really pushing for PvP and pushing for rank 1. So I was like, so it was like just PvP focus, and I saw all these people raid, and I was like, oh, I did it far sometimes too, but I think.
Well, you could go back there. Yeah, I mean, you could go back there now and do it for the pets or the mounts or the transmog. I mean, that's kind of what I was saying. You know, is it still has a use for somebody, even what is it, like 4 or 5, whatever. I don't know how many years later on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna go check it out after this, actually.
Yeah.
Why not? So my top 2 is like, now that we were talking about everything, I don't know if I regret putting it as my number top 2, but I have it Black Temple, and like I was thinking about why I added to the top 2, and I think just the Illidan fight itself grants like such a high stance for me. I think the Illidan fight had pretty unique components, and it was what was it? We even tried. I remember now. We tried rogue tanking Illidan one time. Do you remember that tactic?
You guys have to be pretty desperate.
Yes.
Yes. You were able to tank Mother Shiraz and also Gruul with that set. Yes.
Yeah, like, so we had a rogue with like 56% avoidance or something, or maybe higher.
102.4.
Oh, damn. Okay. See, this is why I love talking to you about this, because even when I mess up or even when I don't know a fact, you know it instantly. So like,
yeah.
Whenever I'm doing anything related to like just reminiscing or talking or like just chilling. Like, dude,
yeah, how much avoidance did rogues need 10 years ago to tank a boss? Oh, 102.4?
Dude,
duh.
As we go the encyclopedia. I don't even know what
yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. Yeah, okay, so 102.4, that number not exactly rings a bell. So you had that number, and then you had obviously evasion, where
yes,
he wouldn't hit you, and then whenever it hit the rogue, it hit him like 90% of his health. So whenever like he got hit, you had to like top him off instantly, because sometimes, obviously, was avoidance on diminishing returns?
Well, it was on diminishing returns, but you could still reach it if you had enough dodge gear, because back then you were able to gem dodge and gem other avoidance mechanics like parry and everything. But the reason that the rogue would take a lot of damage is Illidan used to cast an ability called Shear, which would take away 60% of its target's health if it wasn't dodged, which made... at that point, bear druids were incredibly strong, and they almost added that mechanic in. And they ended up taking it out later on once they redesigned active mitigation in the Lich King patch. But before then, they had Shear in there just to kind of to make warrior tanks viable. I think that was one of the big reasons, honestly, because warrior tanks at that point were, as we talked about, like paladin tanks had overtaken entirely. Yeah, they were bad
because we had warrior tanks. And like
yeah.
And one of our
need to have one.
One of our raiders was like, okay, we'll just put our ult in there. So we had an ult druid tank,
right?
Tank Illidan, and then we had the warrior tank who just like die every pull, and it was so annoying.
Well, if your warrior tank was dying on Illidan, that's probably because they didn't know what they were doing. I mean, that's honestly the truth. Is that a lot of the fights, like the way that Illidan would work, is that also you'd have to have somebody with the fire resistance set, or often you would have that. You'd have one of the tanks with the fire resistance set, because after Illidan got through his first phase, you know, he'd go up in the air and he'd throw his glaives down and he'd summon those adds.
Exactly.
And those adds were incredibly hard to deal with, and they did a ton of damage because it was all fire damage. So you'd have one tank with like kind of a lot of fire resistance gear, and then the other tank with actual regular gear to tank Illidan. And so you damage down the regular tank's ad first, and then you'd go into fire resistance tank ad, because obviously the fire resistance tank would be taking less damage. And also, like, you didn't just need fire resistance for that fight, you also needed shadow resistance.
Yeah.
Exactly, for whenever Illidan casted the Demon Within. And so you had to have a Warlock casting Searing Pain, because it used to generate extra threat onto the boss. And so, like, all those different mechanics were just, like, ridiculously, like, kind of weird. And it's like, back then, like, you used to have, like, all of these, like, unique, weird jobs that people would have to do. And that was an example of one where, like, okay, I'm the shadow tank for Illidan. So you have, like, a warlock with a full shadow resistance set that's useful for literally nothing else. But if you want to kill Illidan, you've got to have that. And in a way, that's, like, kind of annoying. But also, in a way, it's really cool, you know? And I don't know, like, really if it's good to have that in the game or not. But, you know, it's definitely something that I like to think about.
Do you miss shadow resistance and fire resistance and all that stuff, or do you think it was?
Yeah, I mean, I miss the sets in a way. I mean, losing all of your stats and everything was kind of annoying. I don't really know how they could add that back into the game. I really don't know. I like the idea of resistance sets because it gave people something that they could farm in a way that they could progress in a raid outside of a raid, right? So it's like back in Vanilla WoW, there were a lot of bosses and items that you could get from Maraudon, you know, level 40 instance back then, that were actually that you would use for AQ 20 and even AQ 40. So all of that stuff I thought was really interesting and really cool. Obviously, it can be kind of frustrating if you don't have that, or to re-gear people and making sure that everybody has these sets and, like, what's really the point of them? Are they redundant? Yes, and then also no. I mean, like, it kind of makes sense, right? It's like you have this giant fire elemental. Maybe you should have fire resistance gear, you know? And so it's, you know, I mean, it kind of makes sense. But at the same time, you know, I can see both sides of the story, and you know, maybe it's just nostalgia or something, but maybe I'd like to see it come back from a, you know, maybe in a limited way.
Okay. Yeah, Supremus was another fight that I really thought it was cool. Just like from a graphic point of view, you had like this massive thing just like stomping around in this free zone, I guess, and we just had to kite away, and like, and it was just like sometimes, like the first time we did it, it was a shit show. Like we didn't know what we were doing, we didn't know how to kite it, or people would just like get stuck in the little things and then would just die because the boss caught up to him.
Or you'd want to be lazy and you wouldn't clear all the trash, and then one of the guys would fly around and attack you at like 40% health. It's like,
there was a knockback, right, on the fight?
Knockback. I don't remember if there was a knockback, actually.
Because I remember like somehow we pulled sometimes, and it was like, okay, we gotta wipe, or like we had to like try to kill like the ads at the same time as the boss.
Well, you'd have to run away. You'd have to kite away from the boss because he'd do the fixate on you.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really a knockback, but players would have very limited space.
Yeah, it was like we had to go. So if we wanted to be meticulous, you cleared the whole thing. You cleared like 3/4, and then like, if you're being lazy, you cleared half, and then like you risked the fact that one of them would run, like a pet would run into a thing, or I don't know,
right?
Or ads, and that was like just a pretty interesting. It felt like the Fell Reaver in Hellfire Peninsula. Oh, man.
Yes, I can see why you say that. This giant ominous thing coming towards you, and if it hits you, you're dead.
Yeah, like
it's very simple.
Now that we talked about this, like I don't know if I would put it number 2, but I think the Illidan fight was really cool, and in fact it was pretty iconic. Obviously, Black Temple.
Well, that would probably be number 2 if I was going to say, you know, in terms of fights and like people's importance. Like Illidan was another guy that people knew. People knew Illidan. So whenever Illidan, like the Illidan was on the box, it's like people played the game, people played Burning Crusade, they wanted to kill Illidan.
You wanted to reach that.
Yeah, you would get up there and you had like the, you know, the moon with like the clouds behind it. And it was like an amazing area, and then you had a comma, and it's like, oh, you are not prepared. And, you know, he pulls out the glaives, and then the glaives actually drop. And it was just, yeah, it was incredible. It was a great fight, you know, especially from a war perspective.
Yeah. So that's why, I guess, like, it's a sentimental feeling. Black Temple is number 2.
Yeah.
And then now, I guess, like, moving on from that, we have something, the number 1, actually, finally...
We agree on this
one. We agree on number 1, which is great. Which was probably my all-time favorite. I think that instance was amazing, and I guess I'll give you the privilege to tell the people which.
No question about it. No even hesitation. number one is Old War.
Of
Let's be
course.
real.
Oh my
Let's be
God.
real.
Like,
Oh my
every
god, it was
single
an
thing
amazing
about
grade.
that instance was just beautiful. Every boss.
Yeah.
I don't remember a single boss that I didn't like. All of the bosses were amazing. The first one, that was the Leviathan.
Yeah, I didn't hate any of the bosses either. Now that I think about it.
The Leviathan was really interesting. It was kind of fun.
Well, it was the first fight that they ever did like that. Well, actually, no, that's not true because they used Malygos, and the Drakes and Malygos behaved the same way as machines did in Old War. But in a lot of ways, it was the first time that you actually did the entire fight in the machines. I thought Flame Leviathan was really cool.
Yeah, and I remember that if people messed up, you still could DPS the boss. So like you can see the little people, like if they messed up and broke their cars.
Going, guys! No,
you can see like the people just like either milling them until they died, or just like casting.
Yeah, just get run over. Yeah, it was great. I've seen a lot of that.
Then obviously the flying boss as a second. What was the name?
Razor Scale.
Yeah, Razor Scale was really nice. I remember like everybody just talking the first night. Everybody was just talking in chat, like in all chat, and it's like, oh, we got Razor Scale down to like 30%, and like everybody just talking about
Yeah.
it. Yeah, right, bullshit. And, like, oh my god. And then, like,
Yeah, people bragging back then. Well, that was off the heels of Tier 7. So Tier 7 was a joke. I mean, even Malygos was pretty hard. But, I mean, if you compare, like, Malygos was about as hard as Razor Scale was. And, like, a lot of those fights in Old War were a huge step up in difficulty. So you had all these, like, people that were in, like, it's like, kind of like the difference between, like, Emerald Nightmare and TOV, or, like, Emerald Nightmare and Nighthold. You had all these guilds like, yeah, man, we cleared Nax, we run this shit. And then they go into Old War and they can't even figure out Flame Leviathan. And Wizards like, yeah, no, you don't run shit. You know, like, come on. And the thing is, like, you're like, okay, finally, all right, we beat Flame Leviathan. You know, we got Razor Scale down. You know, we killed, you know, the Ignis Furnace Master, which was pretty easy boss. Yeah. Maybe even killed XCD Constructor. And it just gets harder. Yep. It just gets harder. And you finally beat the whole instance, right? You finally kill Yogg. And it's like, all right, bitch, do it again with the hard modes.
Exactly.
It was just like, oh my god. Like, I remember thinking, like, man, we're never going to beat Memorons. And then they're like, yeah, but if you hit the button, everything does 25% more damage and there's fire everywhere. And I'm like, what?
Dude, Mimiron.
We can't even handle it without the fire.
Mimiron, like, you could, that was one of the fights that made you think, like, whether a guild was in sync or not. Because, like...
Am I in a good guild or not?
Exactly.
Yes.
It pretty much was. Like, I remember doing Mimiron hard mode on a puck towards the end of Wrath of the Lich King, and it was still like awful. Like, I was like, people were geared and stuff, but like if they weren't in sync, if they weren't doing DPSing everything together, it was just like everything would reset and you would just like eventually die.
Right.
So and like people just not running from the barrage. Holy crap! I remember that.
Yep, standing in the rockets, not getting hit by the barrage. Not moving out.
I was raiding from South America, so I was raiding with, like, sometimes I would get lag spikes, so I would sometimes die to the barrage, and like I would be so pissed at myself. I was like, how am I dying to this stupid? Like, I was just raging at myself.
I remember I was talking to a friend of mine on AIM. You remember AIM, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking to a friend of mine on AIM, and I tabbed out to respond to a message. And right, like, the last frame that I saw whenever I tabbed out was Mimiron casting the explosion that you had to run out for. And I knew my computer was way too shitty for me to be able to tab it and run back in. So I just opened up my mic, I'm like, guys, I'm lagging. I died.
I remember that somebody's computer went to like 4 FPS whenever we fought Mimiron. Because like that fight was pretty graphic intensive.
With the fire and everything, and you had like all the stuff that's outside, that's kind of in the boss area that you had to render at the same time.
Yeah, that was pretty sick. What else? What other fight did you like? I liked the General Vezex. Like oh my god!
Yeah.
Whenever you could DPS in the as a ranged, whenever you could DPS in those puddles, oh my god! I was a movie back in the day. So
you're a god.
Oh,
yeah.
It was so fun.
What was crazy is that you would go through all of the hard modes. And you would finally unlock Algalon. And you only had an hour to kill Algalon.
That was the best.
So if you had somebody DC, if you had anything go wrong, so you were just trying to chain pull and understand Algalon as much as possible, because really Algalon was a very mechanically simple fight. So people would be trying to do that fight, and like I remember, like there were so many like panic pulls that we would do on Algalon. Okay, we've only got 23 people here. Let's go. And people would just go crazy, and so you would finally kill Algalon, and you're like, you're done with Ulduar, and it's like, no, you're not. You're not done with Ulduar. Did you kill Yogg with no keepers up?
Exactly.
And it's like the difference in difficulty between normal Yogg with like all keepers up, probably normal Yogg, or even like Yogg with one keeper up, and Algalon. The difference between the two, Algalon was much harder, was the same difference in difficulty between Algalon and Yogg with 0 keepers. It was just even more insane that you could possibly imagine. And if I remember right, Yogg 0 took more time to kill than any other boss, barring like Cthulhu being numerically impossible, and I think maybe also the Lich King. But it took a huge amount of time to even do that fight, for the first kill to even happen. And if you remember, the first kill happened, it was some Chinese guild called like I think Stars or something like that.
Yeah.
And they used 8 or 9 warlocks, because warlocks could cast Drain Soul while they were faced away from the boss, so they wouldn't get mind controlled in the last phase.
Wow.
It was insane.
Yeah, I remember warlocks. We had like 4 warlocks in the raid just for that. Like we got server first, but it took so long, like to put people in perspective, that a new raid released, and we were still doing like we decided to not put priority in the new raid, and still like go for Yogg 0, because nobody had the server first, even though the raid released the new one, the trial of
our server first went out after Trial of the Crusader went out too.
Trial of Crusader.
Yeah, and we had a really good guild on our server at that point. Like there was a really good guild. They didn't kill it.
We were top.
It was really hard.
Top 30 or something like that, and we were still like fighting because like the schedule release of that was pretty close, and yeah, like oh my god, I remember when
it was insane.
It was so many components that I think that Yogg 0 was part. Like I guess we might be able to do a top 5 bosses of.
Yeah, if I did that, if we did do that, Yogg would definitely be on my list.
God, that's.
Absolutely.
Such a complex boss. I love bosses that you have to like. It felt like you were like doing the amazing race button in World of Warcraft. Like you're just doing like going through like so many obstacles and so many objectives and so many phases, and coordination between the top and bottom part, and like DPSing the brain. It was insane.
Oh yeah, you had so much stuff going on in Yogg, and if you compare the complexity of that fight to the complexity of fights now, I mean, there's actually some parity between the two. Like, you can actually compare it. Whereas, if you look at a fight like Algalon, which is relatively very simple, you have the 4 ads you have to kill, you run inside the circles whenever you cast a big ability, and tank swap at 3 stacks. Like, that's really it. Like, there's not a lot else going on. Oh, there's a red swirly that you have to move out of too. It's super, super simple. But whenever you break down everything that you had to do with Yogg, even Yogg with 1 keeper alive, it was incredibly complex. There were so many different things you had to deal with. You had to deal with all 3 of the different tentacles. You had to deal with the ads in the first phase, and you had to like tank them in certain ways. You had to make sure you didn't get up by the pools. Then you get to the last phase, and you had to deal with those ads, and it was just all of these mechanics in a way that they would function together was something that for that time period in the game was just unheard of. And I think that's what made Yogg such an incredible fight, is it was just, head and shoulders above any other fight that we had probably ever seen at that point in terms of difficulty and complexity.
Yeah, I agree. It was.
Yeah.
Did you know, by the way, that little side point? The Stars Guild.
Yeah.
Do you know Eloise, the Hearthstone
Yes.
player? She was the Stars raider.
Really? Oh, that's fucking amazing!
Yeah,
wow.
She was a hardcore WoW player for like years.
That's crazy. I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah. It was like cool side note that.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's actually really, really cool to see that. Like, because you never think that you'd interact with somebody from that guild because they're like Chinese or Korean or something like that. But then turns out one of the people is like a really, really successful Hearthstone player. That's awesome.
Yeah, she came up to me and Swifty and I was like, oh, she's not gonna know who I am. And like
yeah.
And she did. I was so happy. I was like, oh damn. She actually knows. And then she told me that she was a part of Stars, and I was like, damn, I kind of idolized that guild, and maybe not.
I was
idolized, but like I was like.
Well, you'd look up to
them.
him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like, I think that was the same guild also. Maybe it was Ken Raiders. There's Ken, that is another name that was familiar. But there was another guild that did the same thing in Spine of Deathwing, where they brought in like 18 arcane mages or something like that. And it was always like those Asian guilds. They would come up with like these weird fucking strats. It's like, wait, what? You're bringing in 8 warlocks? And like back then, it's like, I mean, this isn't like max 40 where you need, 8 tanks or something for 4 horsemen. Like, this was unheard of. Yeah. So it's like this crazy strategy, and the fact that it worked, and not only did it work, but it worked better than anything that anybody else in the entire world was trying. And I think that whole the idea of that, I think that kind of expanded people's horizons on how they were going to look at fights and how they were going to approach them, just to see people just kind of taking a completely different perspective.
Like people just snooping into other guilds' Warcraft logs or whatever, and then and then like just figure out the comps and stuff. It's pretty funny.
World of Logs back then, I believe. Yeah.
Speak of trouble, man. The good times.
Certainly an adventure.
Oh, but I guess this wraps up the top 5. We ended up going for like about an hour, but you know what? This might be like sort of like a podcast-ish. Top 5 thing, but I had a blast talking about this, and like I think reminiscing about good things in the game is just like you don't get tired of talking about it, you know?
No, I really don't. As you can see, it's been an hour.
Yeah, I know. And then like we were talking about like how we missed Jeff Kaplan. Like I was like, oh man.
Yes.
Like
if you guys ever want to see, like if you ever guys want to understand like the way that at least like I feel about the game, watch the 2005. It's on YouTube. Watch the 2005 Raid and Dungeons panel at BlizzCon for World of Warcraft, and that is wow. That is what I want to see. And Jeff Kaplan does that panel. Have you seen that before?
Actually, I don't know if I have. I might have.
You should take a look, man. That's like, if I was seeing that, I'd be like, oh my god, man, I cannot wait to waste my life on this game. You know?
Oh my god. And Jeff Kaplan, if you guys didn't know who Jeff Kaplan is, well, he leads now the Overwatch team, but he used to lead the World of Warcraft team during Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King, if I'm correct.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah, and then I think his last fight, I think was Ulduar, and then like Ian Hazacostas, I think Trial of Valor, or was it Trial of Crusader?
Trial of the Crusader.
Was Ian Hazacostas' first fight that he was really involved in. I think Jeff moved to Titan and then moved to Overwatch. I think it was the sequence. But yeah, we miss you, Jeff. We miss you.
Yeah. Come back and do more raids.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind like if he collabed with like I mean, who knows? Maybe he still gives input. I doubt it though. Like I think with Overwatch is super complex, and
I think for a lot of people that are extremely creative like that, because you have to be in order to be a game developer, you kind of lose that same type of creative spirit that you have working on the same thing for a very long period of time. And I think that's why you see a lot of people where even though they were much more popular doing something else, they still do what they are doing. Overwatch is like extremely popular. I'm not saying that Overwatch is like not popular or anything, but like just an example, like actors and stuff, it gives them a way to kind of create things and kind of be creative and do things in a completely different like avenue. Yeah. Like Overwatch is a completely different game than World of Warcraft. So I think that's probably why you see so many people switching around and moving around. And there are some people. Yeah, there are some people that just like to kind of build and iterate and create this world, that they've made. But also a lot of other people like to kind of do different things. And I think that might be why you see so many people like coming and going.
Yeah, true. I mean, we'll talk about it for sure in next week's Allcraft, but
absolutely,
Holinka leaving was a huge thing. That even though it was talked about a lot during when he departed, it was it's a pretty big thing, and then the people stop talking about it. But like, it's actually a huge thing that Helinka left to do some other things as well. But that's beside the point. We'll talk about that on All Crafting next week.
Make sure to watch.
Yes, make sure to watch the book.
Right, yeah.
But, dude, Asmongold, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. Well, podcast on this video.
Right. It might as well be at this point.
Thank you so much for joining me in this video, man. Obviously, check out Asmongold. Links are all in the description. And I guess maybe if you guys enjoy this video, we can make it.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, man. I had a great time.
Alright, man. Thank you so much. Peace.
Yep. See you later.
My force will overrun you. Pin them. Many shots, one kill. Run them through. Spirits, guide my blade. This is not the last of us.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Allcraft. I'm your host, Rich, and I'm joined by Asmongold and Haunted as usual. And we have a guest today. It's going to be Michael Hogman. Welcome to the show, man.
Yo, thank you very much. Hey, thank you guys for having me. This is a show I've been wanting to come on for a few weeks now, and I'm pretty excited to be here. So thank you very much, and hopefully we get to talk about some pretty cool stuff today.
Yeah, man.
We have a lot to talk about.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
For sure.
Yeah,
How's everyone doing?
I'm doing great. We ended up missing last week, and then we pushed the show back by one day, and it was just because like we've all been all over the place, which is a lot of it was for World of Warcraft as well. And during that time, there was a lot of stuff that was announced. I think the biggest thing too, I know you're pushing right now, Asmongold, and Haunted. We kind of had like the conversation back and forth with the season end being announced like super early. But I know I had just gotten to the point, like, usually what I do is I get in my games first, and then it's like, okay, I have my 150 wins, whatever. Now it's time to actually push. And I thought I had another week or two, and now all of a sudden it's like, it's time to go.
I'm at 2100. I was like, okay, I just got back from an event. I'm gonna chill for a bit, get in the groove, and then like start pushing ready. It's like, oh, by the way, like the day before I come back, season ending is announced, and like you don't even know it's a week, if it's a week and a half. I don't know what's going on.
It ends on June 13th.
Oh, they give you the date exactly this time. Okay.
Yeah, that's what they said. It's funny to me because I was thinking, I was laying in bed the other day. I was like, man, I should start doing arena. They're gonna end that season soon, and I'm gonna be another idiot duelist for one more season. And then I wake up the next day, and now they're ending the season. So I've got to get, I gotta get some rating. Okay, that's what it comes down to.
Did you get your wins yet?
What?
Did you get your wins yet? Do you know how many wins you have?
I'm gonna need to do enough wins. I mean, if I need to get up to like 2700, which probably ain't even gonna happen, let's be real. But if I'm gonna try to do it, I'm gonna have to win. It's not gonna be a big deal.
Yeah, didn't you tweet at the beginning of the season that you're gonna get Gladiator?
Yeah. So like, what if everybody's gonna like retweet that the season ends, and like I'm sitting there on my non-armored Stormdrake or whatever, people retweet that back to me. Hey, what now, bitch? And I'm gonna be like,
what happened to this?
Yeah. And I always say I come through with stuff, so I mean, if that doesn't happen, I'm gonna feel kind of dumb, and also I want one of those mounts. So we'll see what happens. I am looking for partners.
Like the mounts is honestly one of the best things this expansion. I think the mount is one of the coolest. I think my ranking is the Nether Drake, then the Wrath of the Lich King mounts, the Frostworms, and then these ones.
Yeah. I mean, you remember whenever they brought out the Vicious Gladiator one, and it was literally the Sartharian Drake, except
so bad.
That was the worst thing ever. And, I mean, you think about like before they brought out ICC in Wrath, those Deadly Gladiator, Relentless Gladiator, Furious Gladiator frost worms are fucking amazing because you didn't have any frost worms in the whole game. And so if you see somebody, it's like everybody's sitting around like a basic bitch on their Proto Drake, on their little hippogriff like an idiot, and then you see somebody on a frost worm and you're like, oh my god, this dude's a gladiator.
Yeah,
So,
I think the frost worms weren't for PvE content weren't released until you actually did the achievements for an ICC, right? It was off the achievements too. Yeah, because I remember I had those mounts, and I thought that they were really cool. But it was mostly because like you were looking at everyone who had the PvP ones at the time. I know I didn't get mine.
And they were cool anyway. I love those mounts. I mean, they were probably one of the coolest and best designed mounts that they've ever made, even whenever you compare them to mounts now. But I do like it. I think it's cool if like gladiators do have a specific mount, and this is coming from somebody that's never gotten gladiator. So if gladiators have a distinct and specific mount, it makes it feel like their efforts and their time is more rewarded, you know. And like you see somebody with like the primal gladiator's Gronling, like that doesn't really look anything like any of the other mounts, right? Some of the other ones are much more easy to or harder to distinguish, and so. I was very glad that they had the Storm Drakes as being the Gladiator mounts, and even though you are able to get a Storm Drake now from the Valanchar cache, I still think it's okay.
Yeah, in fact, actually, when Legion Beta was happening, actually Legion Alpha, they had planned to use the Horn Unicorn Corsair mounts as the Gladiator mounts, and then they actually changed that because everybody started posting on Twitter like, "What the hell is this, dude? We don't want a unicorn." So now we got the Storm Drakes, and it looks like way better.
Like, we knew you guys hated PvP, but you're gonna give us a unicorn? And it's like trying to add insult to injury.
Yeah, but actually the next season's Corsairs look pretty cool. There's the black one and the white one, and they both look like really, really cool, actually.
I haven't really, like, I still don't even have the Azure one. I think I'm Prestige 11 or something like that, so I haven't even been working on it. I've been leveling an alt, playing an alt, going through Mythic Nighthold again. So it's been a real show, but I've got to get back into PvP and like try and get that rating. My warlock named Crack Monkey. I thought it was a really funny name when I was 16.
Yeah, I will say warlocks are pretty fun right now, so that's a pretty reasonable one to be leveling. But what do you guys think about them actually announcing it? I mean, it came out of nowhere, but I think
It didn't come out of nowhere. The TOS is going to come out obviously on the 20th.
Yeah, I mean I was caught off guard, but also we have 2 weeks notice now, which is pretty much what everyone was asking for.
Well, they always give 2 weeks notice.
Yeah.
It's been 2 week notice forever, so I think it's a good thing.
Well, what happened last season? Last season it ended up.
Yeah, it was really, really odd last season. There was like delays in the season ending. It ended longer than people expected, so the ratings would inflate higher than people expected, and it was like way shit show.
They said soon it was like ended up being like from that post soon was like 3 weeks total or something like that. Right? I don't know.
Yeah, well, they never really gave a defined date.
Yeah.
They just said, yeah, it's gonna be over soon. When is that gonna be? I don't know. Soon.
But this time we got it, so pretty happy about that. Now everyone, I feel like, can actually go about getting it like the right way. Like honestly, like you know that you should have your wins by now, start pushing for rating, yada yada, and just plan accordingly. The one thing that we don't necessarily have like an update on like we did last season is we don't really have like the rating prediction to probably the fullest that we were talking about like a month or two ago. Actually, how long ago was that? Probably 2 months that we were kind of...
Yeah, something like that. I mean, the rating prediction with Blizzard, like they could do it really 2 ways. They could announce it every like every day or every week or something like that, and they could say, yeah, these are what the current cutoffs are going to be. And they could also have something that would update in real time, like every minute or every 5 or 10 minutes, and it would recalculate what everybody's ratings are and what they aren't. But of course, what people could do is they could just not log off as long as they can, because the armory only updates whenever you log off. So there's always going to be ways for people to kind of like do weird things to try to make the ratings inflated or inflate their own ratings or help themselves get Gladiator. And that might be a little minor thing that they can do. But I mean, as I think everybody knows, I mean, people are going to do whatever they can to get that advantage. So it's like back in the day, remember people used to make arena teams over and over and over and get 10 wins just to try and create a couple more slots on the Gladiator ladder? Yeah, like that used to happen all the time in Cataclysm.
Yeah.
And so it's not really a big surprise that that kind of stuff is going to happen. And I feel like what they're doing now is probably the best solution. Like, I mean, do you guys think that we could do, and they could do anything besides what they're doing now that would be better? Like, what about you, Michael?
Absolutely.
Like,
There's Well, as someone who actually pushed Gladiator last season and ended up getting it, that process was like extremely stressful. It felt really stressful because what would happen is like they would announce the cutoffs at random times, and then all of a sudden people would be like, okay, I gotta get that, and then the rating would inflate even more so than what you would expect. So Gladiator would actually be harder to get. And I feel like what they could do better is actually create a system in game that does automatic calculations for what Gladiator and Rank 1 would be. So basically when you hover over, say, the rated section, it says the season, or anything really. Like it says at the end of the season, you know, it says the season is ending soon. Here's what the current cutoffs are for Gladiator and Rank 1, and then that automatically updates as people play. So like every 10 minutes or something like that. I don't know what kind of like power that would take from the developers to make happen, but maybe like in a future expansion, I think that would be a really awesome thing to have, because it would no longer have, or it would no longer cause any questions as to like if you're going to get Gladiator or if you're going to get Rank 1 or Duelist, Survival, whatever. I think titles right there.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think the thing is like asking for it in like the clear way of being like, this is exactly what we want, kind of figure out a way to do it somewhat like this is probably the best way to go about it. Because I know the one super complicated thing about the actual rankings, which we already touched on, is the more you announce them and the more they're visible, the more people react to them and change them. So it's like it's like the same as stocks, right? It's like a bunch of people got on the hype train for Bitcoin like over the past months, right? Like, and they were like, yeah, the price of Bitcoin is going up. So more people got into it, bought a bunch of them, and all of a sudden now the price is super high. It's the same with rating. It's like, oh, I'm close right now, I'm gonna push really hard. Then a bunch of people who were close pushed really hard, and that pushed the rating even further away. So
that's always how it's been.
Yeah, it's just
like that's something that I think should be noted is that every season the rating goes up probably about 100 points in the last 2 weeks, and it's been more. Yeah, I mean, at least, and that's what happens every season. I don't think that Blizzard announcing those numbers really creates that, because even before, ArenaMate and the other websites were relatively, I mean, I would say they were relatively accurate besides in the first season of Legion, because they changed the way they calculated the titles. So, I mean, people have always...
Oh my God. That was a story to tell, where people weren't getting their mounts and stuff for like multiple weeks.
Oh my God, they were so mad. And it's like, of course they are. It's like, imagine, like, you sit there neck-bearding it up for like 6 weeks playing the game, and you log on and you're a fucking duelist. I mean,
I just shaved today, and I'm gonna log on tomorrow. I'm gonna be freaking duelist. It's gonna suck.
Yeah, you're like, you know, boy, I'm gonna get my Storm Drake, and it's just doesn't happen at all. So I can see why people would want that. I think honestly, Michael, that's probably the best solution that I could think of too. Is, you know how they have the Mythic Plus leaderboards now, right?
Yeah.
Like if they just introduced a PvP component or alternative to that had like the RBG and 3v3 rankings and maybe some other statistics, that would be amazing.
I would love to see the community. I would love to see the community like kind of phase away from having to go to the website to get information about the game other than the armory and like the forums. It's really, you know, when you have to look up systems that are in the game onto the website to get information about if you're doing well in the game, I feel like that you know, and I feel like that system is just odd to me. So I would like there to be systems to complement the community needs in the actual game.
Yeah.
You know, information to just be displayed in the game so that you don't have to go outside of that. It's just how I feel about it.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see them introduce other types of ways that you can kind of figure stuff out in game as well without having to go onto a website. Or even maybe make some sort of like browser, you know, functionality inside the game, to where like if there's an article on something, you can just click on it for like more information, and it comes up in the game rather than having to go onto the website. And I think just making that small change where people don't have to take that extra step would really kind of it would get a lot of people to look at that stuff, more people to look at it than they do now.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
On top of that, I'd also like to see them say how many people are on the ladder. You know, how many gladiator slots are there, right? If there's 151 or 155, I'd want to know the difference, just because that would help me even more in a way than the rating. Because if I'm like rank 160, I know I have to get probably to 150 or so.
Yeah, right now I'm actually.
I
Go ahead.
hope that they steer away from the actual rating numbers.
Yeah.
Just give away the position. Honestly, like Michael said, I think that it's that would be super good for the game to add icons next to your rating or next to the rating bracket telling you what your prediction is based on, for example, last Tuesday. For example, okay, you hit this rating. If you stay in this sort of slot, you get Gladiator or something like that. Something more interactive and tells you the information about the game. I would like to know also like how the ranking on the website, because to be honest, I really don't go to the World of Warcraft website more often at all. Like, so I don't know like how you can even get the information besides MMO Champion and seeing the blue posts that are highlighted. So
it's not readily accessible.
I do only for the ranking slots because I'm in a position right now where my team and I are pushing for the rank 1 title. So I'm currently ranked number 43 in the US. So that means like I have to always be looking how much rating is it inflating per day so that our team can basically keep up with that. So we can be at like an advantageous spot to get the rank 1 titles, you know? Because if we continue playing as the rating inflates, then it's likely that we'll continue going up based on our win percentage. So it's like I have to continuously look at the ladder to see where the ladder is developing in terms of inflation. But I feel like it would be really cool for future expansions to see something along the lines of like the Overwatch system, to where if you're top 100, you have like that lightning badge or whatever that gives you the title at the end of the season. There's gold, there's diamond, there's the traditional ranking system. I feel like would be much more beneficial to the game because I feel like WoW. While I do enjoy the fact that there is differences in the WoW system, I think that other games have adopted this system for a reason. It really does allow people to help understand where they are, and also like there's a tangible reward. So maybe having another icon along the lines of the prestige icon. So maybe having a second one next to your name that's like the gold or the diamond ranking or the top 100 ranking, like whatever it is. There's silver or bronze.
I think a big thing that you're touching on, Michael, is just like the idea that all of it should really be in the game, right? Like you should be able to be immersed in the game and get all of that feedback and know what's going on. I also think a step further is kind of like you talk about like the leaderboard, right? It exists for Mythic Plus dungeons. Like, do you know who's on the leaderboard for Mythic Plus dungeons? Like, I don't. Like, I know I can look at it, but I don't. I wish the game did something to celebrate the players who are actually on the top of the leaderboards, whether it's Mythic Plus, whether it's in arenas, whether it's in RBGs. Like, like those events, like when like someone used to kill Algalon, like it had like that really extensive, like exciting event. Like, I wish there was something like that. Yeah, just like, like there was something like that like, actually made it feel kind of like we were in the world, like it used to feel like all the time, and also celebrate players who are actually achieving the highest level of gameplay.
You know what something reminded me is that, I don't know if you guys have played H1Z1, but H1Z1 has on the lobby, it has like a leaderboard display, like a huge leaderboard, so you can see obviously like it's a completely different system than World of Warcraft, but adding something in the game that gives that sort of recognition would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, like just giving the players visibility, like what you're saying, Haunted, is going to be reward in itself. Like people are going to compete for the leaderboard slots just so they know anybody that opens up the game is going to see their name, right? And people always do that. It's like if you get a really cool mount, you're going to try and stand in like the area of the city where most people go through, so they'll see you, and that's always how people are.
All the time.
Of course, and just giving people that visibility, I think, is just going to be a reward in itself. So having any sort of, that's what I was saying before about having like some sort of maybe like browser functionality in the game, to where you can actually just look at the leaderboards right then, or maybe it just has some sort of like kind of I guess like super simplistic system that does show what the leaderboards are for Mythic Plus. I'd like that a lot. And I think that would be amazing.
I feel like celebrating competition is definitely a positive thing. It's just a matter of getting the systems in the game to really like enable that type of like social interaction. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to improve that over the next expansion, especially since like the actual core gameplay mechanics are in the game now. So we've talked about like the actual Mythic Plus system, the actual PvP template stuff, prestiging, all that stuff is in the game, so the gameplay is there. I just feel like people need to be celebrated a little bit more when they achieve that thing. And since social interaction is always good, it would be nice if it was a community type of announcement. So Citizens of Dalaran, Asmongold just did Heroes of the Titan again.
Yeah, well, they have that
Stuff like
also.
that.
Like, if you get exalted with the Timbermaw tribe, if you get exalted, I think with the Sporgar as well, they have like a big zone-wide announcement that, oh wow, this person is now the new hero of the Timbermaw. And now, of course, it's not a big deal, but back in vanilla, if that happened, people would usually go over there and target the guy that got the what do you call it? That finished the Furbolg reputation. Like, it was actually a thing. And anything like that, people do take kind of seriously. I think they had that also with Hakar, I believe, in the old CG. And, you know, that kind of announcements and everything, and kind of, again, it just gives people that visibility that I think a lot of people do play to be able to make themselves distinct and stand out. I mean, that's really what matters for people.
It's a reward that like lasts longer, like feels better than like any vanity pet, right? Like, you remember those moments in the game where you actually achieve something like that. That's why a lot of people do play the game. So it's kind of a free reward to bake into the game, and I think it brings the community together. So I think that'd be great to see stuff like that.
Yeah.
And as somebody who like has like, honestly, over the last few months or years, I've kind of been considered more, I have like this stigma around me, like I haven't been high rating in a while. But since I've come up through the rankings, I've noticed that like, as people notice, or as people see that kind of like rise in rating or whatever, similar to what the announcement and all of that type of system would enable, I feel like a lot more people gravitate towards like wanting to play with you. So it's like, as an upcoming player, anybody that maybe like never had a name but really put in the work in order to get high rating in Mythic Plus, Arena, whatever it is, rating, I feel like them being able to make friends off of this system is cool, and also like that player is in demand because they're doing really well, and being able to celebrate that and kind of even acknowledge that in a game in like a mass way, where it's like an announcement or a leaderboard on a wall somewhere in Dalaran, like whatever it is. I think that would be definitely cool. So.
It extends further than you would think too, right? Like, for example, like I started to play with, I talk about him all the time, but I started to play with Billy Poo quite a bit after like was casting over him and things like that. And then from there, like if Dilly Poo randomly introduces me to some other guy, you know, it's like this weird networking thing. And if the game encourages it, you actually start to build the communities that you used to have to form. So the more that the game does that, the better.
For sure, I definitely agree.
I mean, making players able to have like that distinct, like kind of way that they differentiate themselves, I think has always been a big thing that a lot of people want to have. And it's something that I think is kind of like semi-taboo, right? Because whenever you talk about having advantages and being better than other people, a lot of players don't really understand that. But to a lot of people, I think that really does matter. And I think it's part of just like the very basic human condition. You think about people who spend a lot of money on expensive cars. You know, there are things all over in the world, like people buy like a really expensive Rolex watch. It's not so you can tell time better, it's so you can be like, oh wow, I have a Rolex watch, I'm rich. Yeah. Right, that's why.
True.
Well, it's true. And this is the way that people are everywhere. And to think it's not going to carry over into a video game is just naive. Of course they're going to be doing that. And I think that's something that should be acknowledged. And also, you know, maybe, I don't really know, like, I don't know, like, they should do more to kind of facilitate that. And I think that's what WoW used to do more, and they've kind of gravitated away from that. And I feel like the prestige around PvP gear and PvP and having Gladiator has been diminished to a certain extent, and whatever would bring that back, I think would make it more interesting.
Well, we talked about like the reward systems and just general systems around PvP that could be improved upon, like what we would like to see. But one of the things we didn't really talk about is in general just like the state of WoW PvP, whether that's like the balance, just how the season played out in general. And Michael and Hodded, I'd really like to hear your opinions on it because I know you both have been playing as much as you can.
Yeah, I want to go first.
Well, first of all, I haven't been playing as much as my buddy here, Mr. Hawkman, that just got number 40th on the ladder. What a champion!
I'm just like addicted, honestly. Like,
that's good. Okay. Honestly, like I'm really happy that you were able to put in the time and effort and actually climb the ladder. As far as
I'm so pale.
Trust me, I'm on that train too. As far as rating and gameplay this season, I think that Moonkins, I kind of like shied away from arenas because I didn't hit the. This is gonna sound really dumb. I didn't hit the golden talent, and when I hit it, everybody was having the 2000 intellect proc, so I kind of like wanted to grind up the artifact knowledge or like the artifact power in order to be able to do that before I actually queued Serious Arena, because I didn't want my teammates to be in a I didn't want us to be in a disadvantage. So I haven't like really hardcore queued as far as Moonkin State and arenas in general. I actually enjoyed playing lately. Moonkin is in a pretty decent spot, and there's not really super overwhelming comps that are insane. I guess we struggle a little bit with Shadow Priest, or like some long games are a bit tough, but in general, like, I've been pretty satisfied with the arenas. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, so I mean, like the state of WoW PvP, there's so many different like angles we could go at this. I think like from the top of the ladder, is what I've been like experiencing lately. Like, I feel like the game currently is actually in the most like balanced position that it's really ever been in, and I feel like it's really interesting to me that people. I feel like just off of my streams, I feel like people aren't really enjoying the season, but like this is one of the most balanced and like well executed like gameplays seasons that I feel like I've ever played. Like, I'm able to play Fire, Arcane, and Frost at a high level at any point. I can just spec out, I can respec during the game and just queue up in the ladder, no problem. Like, I don't have any issues with that. And I feel like, looking at like Priest, like Disc is good, Holy's used sometimes, not really, a little bit more so in RBGs. Shadow's used, like Windwalker's used, Moonkin's great, Warrior's great, Rogue's great, Feral's great, Hunters are great, Red's being used. Like, while there is comps that have like a little bit more diversity, classes that have a little bit more diversity, I feel like there's not a whole lot of classes out there that just like suck, and that's what I feel like is a successful season. There's always comps that can be better or worse, or counter or whatever, but I feel like overall, like, this season has offered a lot of diversity and a lot of like opportunity to win games, even if you're not in an advantageous comp or whatever, you could still win, which I feel like is possible.
Yeah, I think they've done a really good job with that. Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
Like, so just did the WoW PvP tournaments for Europe, and then there was one for NA. Every single healing, not spec, but every healing class was played. Holy wasn't played, like Holy Priest wasn't played to my knowledge at all, but like everything else was played. So that's pretty crazy, especially like before those two tournaments, it was pretty much all Resto Druid. It was all Resto Druid. But this current balancing that actually happened, like that affected Warlocks and the Resto Druids and everything, it made it incredibly balanced, and it also dramatically reduced the time of games. But like it's like probably, I think it's like 6-minute average per game. That's which awesome. are actually
really good.
Actually, might be 5 minute. It might be 5 minute, because I know like the magic.
Which is like the sweet spot, yeah.
Well, the magic number is you want it to be 6 minutes so people can use their 3-minute cooldowns twice. Like that's the goal. Like that's the perfect amount of time. I think we're like a little bit quicker than that, which I don't mind at all. Then like the other thing is like all of a sudden, like this weekend, this comp is just like, I've been calling it the boogeyman. It's just so weird. It came out of nowhere, but it's like prop pally, enhancement shaman, disc priest.
The boogeyman.
Yeah, it's dampening.
But dude, it just has no setup. It like doesn't even dampen as much as you would think it does. It dampens to like 4%. We saw it dampen to a lot, but like that comp's good, and that came out of nowhere. So I like the fact that we're seeing a bunch of different comps, right? Like we have that comp that wants to, it's kind of a dampening comp that has a bunch of setup, but in the same breath, like we have these really aggressive hunter creeps that are very viable and have game against that dampening comp as well. So I'm pretty happy with the season right now. The only thing is I do think it's relatively difficult to be a spectator right now for PvP with how often it changes. So I kind of hope it stays in the place that it is at for like a little while over like the next tournament or two, and not see too many changes. But 7.2.5 is coming out, so who knows how much things could change after it actually comes out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sad at like next patch. I feel like there's going to be a lot of classes that actually phase way out of the meta to where they're not even playable, and I feel like the next like month and a half are going to be, like mages, for example, we lose Prismatic Cloak, like the viability of Prismatic Cloak. Prismatic Cloak is about half of the gameplay of a mage, I feel like, or not, maybe not half, but like at least a quarter of the gameplay. Like being able to just blink around and then be immune to spells for 1 second, like that's really important, and that's pretty much being removed next patch. So I feel like all of the mage specs are going to fall out of the meta at the very least. And there's classes changes to every class. So who else is falling out of the meta? Who else is going to be really OP for when the next season starts? And I feel like right now, like the season's in a pretty good spot. Obviously, there's like some arguments and some like complaints every now and then, like everyone has it. But I feel like overall the season has a pretty solid like state right now, and I am kind of sad that it's going to change so much in 7.2.5.
I actually have a question to you, Mike.
Sure.
So
What's up?
in the past Allcraft, I kind of like bounced off the idea that maybe a pick and ban system could be interesting to try in World of Warcraft. And since you're saying that every single spec, or like almost every spec, is viable in the game, do you think it could bring a new interesting spin into the game, adding that?
I think that would change the dynamic of Arena a lot. First things first, like what happens to people that only play one class? Like what happens to Zaryu? You know, does he only have to play Mage or Shadow Priest if he gets
it would be
spec?
spec, not like class bans.
Oh, spec, yeah. Totally viable, but there's also the thing where like my Frost and Arcane specs right now, like I've got Concordance on both, and then for my Fire I'm like a little bit behind, so I don't have Concordance on that. So it's like when people fight me, they would probably just ban Fire or Frost and Arcane because I'm already at a disadvantage. So there's so many different questions that have to be answered. I think that the pick and ban could be cool in like a tournament setting for classes and specs, but I do think like in the ladder, I think like the ladder in my opinion is not really as
the more you know
structured. You know, it's meant to be like a solo, like a, you know, queue up with your friends type thing and compete at whatever comp you feel like is best for the ladder. And I like that dynamic. I like being able to change comps based on what I see the meta is. I can see that being like an opportunity for tournaments, because tournaments allow for an even playing field on all characters, so you can just like create a character and it has max points or whatever. But I feel like for ladder, I don't know if that would be
it was more like
idea.
aimed for tournaments, not ladder. But
oh yeah, it's totally an interesting dynamic. It's just I'm sure that there's a lot of questions that have to be answered by a lot of people that are more experienced than I am in tournaments. So yeah, it sounds cool. I just don't know how it would play out.
It's just one of those things too, where it's like, yeah, you can target synergies, right? Like for example, at the beginning of Legion, like you wanted the BM Hunter, so the pet would be stacking on top of your enhancement shaman, right? Like that was a really good synergy. If you banned out BM, all of a sudden like this comp's just like terrible because the enhancement shaman doesn't have enough survivability. The other thing that I don't like about picks and bans of WoW is just like, I feel like 90% of the time they're just going to be banning the healer's best spec.
Or the counter to their best comp.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I do think it's interesting, and I really think that because you are allowed to do community tournaments now. Like community tournaments are actually sponsored by Blizzard. I think someone should mess with the idea and have a different format than what we're used to and try it out. Like there's no reason not to try it out because it is different, right? And like if you look at Hearthstone, for example, obviously a very different game than World of Warcraft PvP, but they're like, off the top of my head, I can think of like 6 different formats that they'll play in tournaments. Some of them dropped off the face of the planet really quick because they were just terrible to watch and terrible to play. But some of them are really cool, and you might only see them like once every 2 months, but you're excited to see it. Like there's one format where basically you need to win with, like, you bring a deck for every single class and it goes back and forth and you have to win with every single, like once with every single class. Like super cool. Don't want to watch it every day, but I think it would be cool to compete in a tournament where bans were actually incorporated and maybe even some other different rules.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of like variance, and I feel like that would have to be something that's put into practice a little bit more to like see where the wrinkles are. Could be an option. I mean, it just depends on who out there is interested in like offering that kind of, you know, tournament, right? Who's interested in putting that spin on it. Seems cool. I'm down to see how it plays out. I think it would be fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe it'll happen in the near future.
I don't really know what to think about the whole ban thing. I feel like if they did a tournament with bans, since it didn't really mirror the other tournaments, I don't really know if Blizzard would consider it a legitimate tournament and give points for it, because it wouldn't really make a lot of sense, right? because it would be completely different in basically every regard and like the meta and how it would be set up. So I don't really know if that would be the right thing to do to actually get points for it, but I would like to see maybe if they want to, I guess like try that out. That would be cool. I just don't really think that that's really the direction that they should go in. Maybe they could try something else, or just try different comps, or maybe make different teams like stronger against other types of teams. Like maybe that would be interesting.
Yeah,
I definitely see more cons than pros.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see like ways to freshen up arenas, you know? Like I'm just like trying to brainstorm. That's all.
Yeah, I think it would be cool. Like I do agree, you can't necessarily do points, but maybe you do like a test,
tournament, like a fun tournament.
test it. Yeah.
Sure. Just for fun.
Yeah.
Because Asmongold, you love having fun, right?
No.
No
So
fun at all?
By the way, is my mic better right now?
Actually, yeah, it does sound better.
Using the actual one. It's like I remember like 3 or 4 times. Like I read the comments on your videos, how people like, oh wow, I think the mic sucks. I'm using this one right here.
I mean, like honestly, I like both. Your voice is beautiful.
You don't like me. But
so
anyway,
we jumped right into the PvP stuff. But the first thing that I think we all wanted to talk about, we really wanted to put a focus just on you, Michael, and like what you're actually up to in general. You want to just catch everyone up who maybe hasn't been following everything that you're doing recently?
Sure, dude. Yeah, thanks. So there's a lot going on right now. I just got back from a bunch of traveling. I started off my streaming schedule finally. So I'm streaming from 6 to 10 p.m. CST every weekday right now. So that's like my main focus, I would say, right now. But I'm also like this like rank 1 push kind of fell into my lap. Like I really wasn't like expecting to have the amount of rating that I do right now. So I'm actually like interested in going for that rank 1 title. It's just that we've been doing well, and I figured, you know, if there's any time to do it, I'm going to do it now. But now that I'm back, I finally am able to stream. I'm finally able to make YouTube videos and be at home for an extended amount of time. I can really focus in and like compete. I can put in my effort. Tomorrow I'm actually doing like an announcement video announcing the rank 1 push that I'm going to be doing, and like doing a new series and stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that. There's just a lot of stuff I'm doing, more so on the PvP side than the PvE side. I finally am doing like RBGs. I'm almost 2,400 RBGs now. Just kind of grinding, man. Like that's really it. Releasing content everywhere and just being me and competing where I can.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Did you feel like that you had to give up PvE in order to like take PvP more seriously? Because I know you rated a lot. So like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I used to raid a lot and I used to PvP a lot at the same time, and I figured that like, this is probably something that's going to resonate with you, Zach, is that if you want to go big dick, you can't have 2 dicks. You gotta have 1 dick.
That's right.
Just gets really big. Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, and if you have 2, they're gonna be medium to small size. You don't want 2 small size dicks. You want 1 big one, and that's what I chose to do. So we're going for it.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you can't be raiding all the time and then also doing PvP, and then you're doing your YouTube videos and streaming and doing all this other stuff. There's only 24 hours in a day. There's no way you're gonna be able to do all that. Yeah. So I totally understand that completely, man. Like, when did you raid though? I don't know. Raid
in Ian. Yeah, I was like an orange parsing mage in Ian.
Really? Oh wow,
yeah.
I had no idea.
I was really into it.
And you quit for Nighthold, or whenever Nighthold came out?
I didn't want to do the 54 trades thing, and I did want to focus more on PvP. I joined a guild that was like, I think it was like top 100 last tier in Ian tier. Yeah. I joined that guild and I tried out raiding a little bit, and I was just like, I don't want to farm Mythic Plus until I fall asleep every day. So
it's a bad time.
Yeah, and I had a lot of other stuff that I was dealing with, more so on the behind the scenes business type things. So I definitely didn't have time. But PvP actually put me in a situation where I'm really strong in PvE now. Like it's crazy. I have 920 equipped item level, and I'm like optimized for my stats, and I just PvP. Yeah. So
really?
It's like really crazy.
Yeah.
I did
because you're just getting all these really good pieces a year. Like last night, I did some RBGs. I got a 915 helmet with like Mastery Haste and like Mastery Main Stat, which is insane for warriors. And I just got that through just chilling, doing PvP. I mean, besides your set bonuses and also the trinkets, like Draft of Souls or Whispers, you know, you can get pretty much everything else just from PvP.
Yeah. I know a lot of people do complain a lot that they're not itemized well. Like they're like, oh, I only PvP, so I have like all versatility gear. So it's cool to hear that some people don't have that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like there definitely is verse gear, but like I did a level 18 DHT today. I was topping damage. I feel pretty good. So
Yeah.
I feel like the PvP gear does just fine. It's more about like the intellect, and I actually got like a 925 trinket that just procs intellect for 20 seconds, and it's like insane. It does crazy damage.
Oh, that sounds great. Are you just PvEing as Frost mostly, or?
Yeah, but I barely even PvE. I just mostly do the Mythic Plus, and that's about it.
Just do your weekly, and then that's about it.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's what I do on most of my alts too.
Yeah, RBGs are actually insane for artifact power. Like I said earlier, I have 2 weapons at Concordance already, and my fire is pretty close. So
Yeah, that's
I don't even have that.
That's another thing I thought. Like once I started doing RBGs, that I was just catching up so fast. So like, I definitely need to find either this or next season or whatever. If you do PvP and want to get to your points or max out your weapon talents, RBGs is the way to go. 100%.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you just get so much AP. Like the first win a day, I think you get something like 40 mil right now. It's just insane.
Yep, and then you get upwards of 14 mil every win. And
yes.
As you prestige, you get I think 12 mil or something. So it's pretty good.
Prestige?
Yeah, PvP prestige. It gives AP every 2 levels.
Oh, I thought
Downer
you
levels.
got more. You got more AP in RBGs the higher your prestige rating was. That's
no.
what I thought. No, I didn't think so.
No, you
That's
just
pretty,
get you get the glory of the hero or whatever it is, or glory of the melee or.
Oh
whatever it
yes.
is.
The ones that they vendor for 100 gold. Like every single time I see one of those, I'm like, it's 100 gold, but I end up holding on to them though. But yeah, I feel like AP in general has been better than it was, especially at the beginning. Like as more people get Concordance, and they did make the changes that were PvP exclusive for Concordance. I feel like it's not really going to be as big of a deal once everybody gets that first stat, the first 52 talent for it. But as people, as people level up,
or PvE, it's like way more beneficial. But PvP, not so much.
It's good, but it's not like this is a huge big deal. It's still only like maybe 2 to 3% damage increase. And that's only the first trait, and then after that, it's like fractions of a percent. So I mean, I feel like it's in a much better spot than it was before, but I still don't really know, about like allowing Concordance. Like I don't know how you feel about this, but do you think they should allow Concordance beyond the first trait in like ladder?
Yeah, I do actually.
Really?
I think that a lot of the, I feel like a lot of like the long game situation that people were struggling with in PvP was actually softened by like that problem was actually softened really well by Concordance. Like me, I feel like whenever I have Concordance in arena, I'm much more powerful, which is a good thing because like I'm able to actually kill someone as opposed to waiting for 30% dampening in a 12-minute game in order to kill someone.
Right.
So
I meant the traits beyond the first points. It
doesn't really matter a whole lot. Like it's something that you can just get passively. But also as the game goes on, you get higher item level, which means that you're going to get more stamina anyways. So I feel like getting 150 extra intellect or strength or 450 over time, like I don't feel like that really equates to a whole lot. I think what is more relevant, at least at like the higher ratings, is like just your gameplay and your strats. Like there's so many things that you can do wrong, and I feel like if you just play well, like it's that small little intellect buff isn't really gonna offer that much.
It's not going to be the game breaker. Yeah, I mean, I kind of have two minds about it. Obviously, in some ways, it's good to have something that people can progress towards. In other ways, I'd like to see everybody on an even playing field. But whenever it really comes down to tournaments, and that's what ultimately matters in like the highest echelon of competitive play, Concordance is equalized for everybody. So I feel like it's not really that big of a deal as well. Also because they've reduced the amount of strength and agility and intellect that you get per Concordance trait now for PvP exclusive.
Yeah, it's only
so it shouldn't really be that big of a deal.
Yeah, and also I think like the big thing too is like obviously you're going to be in one of two camps when it comes to Concordance, and that's either I want to finish my weapon, or I like the idea of I kind of get to progress on forever and always be working towards something. I think that the way the Concordance actually works now, it does a good job of being in the middle, right? Like it feels like you can passively just put into it, and it doesn't feel like necessarily like, because the downside of having something that lasts forever, and Asmongold, you've said this a million times and you've worded it very well, is just the idea of like, as a min-maxer, you look at that system and go, how can I put time into it and get the most out of it? And you end up putting yourself in a bad position where you don't really play the game to the fullest. I feel like Concordance does kind of achieve a happy middle ground, as happy as it can be. So I'm not too upset with its current state. Whether or not I would like to see something like Concordance back, I think probably not. I think even if artifact weapons came back, I think I'd like if they just ended. What do you think about AK-40 though? I mean, I know it's supposed to go up to AK-50, and Mike, you actually like confirmed that everyone's at 38 right now. If you've been doing it like regularly, you're at AK-38.
Yep.
What do you think
That's
about the cap? That should come out pretty soon compared to the 50 that it was going to get to. I know Asmongold, you made a video on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like 40 isn't exactly like the end-all be-all. I think that they just kind of paused it. I don't really see it being like the end of Legion at AK-40. I just think that they probably slowed down the progression of getting that concordance, so you wouldn't have to farm out 10, 15 concordance right before TOS. Like, once you get to 40, you can get to a certain point, but like when you get up into those like billions and billions of AP required for concordance 20 or whatever it is, like that seems a little bit unattainable if you're getting, I don't know, 50 million a pop. Like it's just really crazy. So I'm cool with it. I think it definitely slows down the need to have to grind for that, and it also like gets us to a point where like that is the maximum for a little while, which is kind of nice. But I think Asmongold has a really solid opinion on IP and AK. I'd like to hear what he has to think about that as well.
Well, I mean, it's like the AK-40 and AK-50. For anybody that doesn't have any context, like Concordance has 50 points in it. The last point's 200 trillion. Like, you're not going to get it if you have AK-50 or AK-40. It's just impossible to get to. You need to play non-stop for like 100 years or something. So the difference between maxing out Concordance with AK-50 and AK-40, I think I said this in my video, is the difference between jumping over Mount Everest or jumping over the Empire State Building. It doesn't matter which one's taller, because it's not going to happen either way. So the important thing is that I think there was a psychological element to this where people felt like, why would I grind for AP now whenever I could just wait? And it was like world of waiting. You would just wait until AK got to a point where you were getting huge amounts. So the AK-50, I believe, was like 50-something million artifact power multiplier, and AK-40 is only 4 million artifact power multiplier. So, I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to go and you're going to wait just for a month to be 10 times more effective? Of course you are. So it makes people feel like all the time that they're spending in the game right now is completely worthless, because it's just going to be made irrelevant in just a couple of months through the system. So I feel like through that, the switch was actually a very, very good one from a psychological perspective for like kind of changing players' behavior.
Yeah, and I also feel like artifact knowledge as a whole, like I'm okay with the system where like progressively allows you to get more AP out of the time. Like I'm cool with that, but I think like the system is really weird, especially for alts. I feel like there's so many wrinkles that could be like smoothed out over the next expansion if they're going to keep the system, right? I feel like maybe like every Tuesday everybody on the server gets an AK level. Like there's no like difference in characters, and I feel like even like if you hit 110 on your, like I just leveled a Shadow Priest and I've got level 30 AK, but I have 38 on my mage. The difference between those is like insane. It's like absolutely crazy how different that is, and I feel like if it was more like baseline of who, like when you got AK levels and kind of went towards the goal of progressing as an entire server, as an entire community, like that feels a lot better, I feel like, than the current system where every character's on a different timer. And
I generally don't like time gating, so I hope they don't really carry that system forward into the next expansion. I'd like to see players be able to progress and do things at their own pace rather than Blizzard dictating that pace. And of course you're going to have people that try hard and they get ahead really early on, but I feel like for everybody else it's not really that big of a deal, and giving those people something that they can work towards, and if they have to play that much to get there, that means that there's going to be a lot of content for everybody else to catch up to. So I'd like to see people, I guess Blizzard, be a little bit more hands-off with how closely they control player progression. And I've seen, like, recently, it just seems like they're trying to make sure everybody's going at the exact same pace. And while that could be, like, a good goal in terms of balance, I feel like in terms of player, fulfillment, that's not really as big. Because you're basically doing the same thing as everybody else. And I think that if you want to really work hard to get ahead, you should be able to do that. And so I think they do need to have like some better common ground, but I think that at this point, I'd really like to see AK be account wide, which effectively, whenever you get 40 AK is going to happen. Because if you guys didn't know, whenever you get 40 AK, all you have to do is buy a book and you give it to your alt, and it automatically gives your alt 40 AK. I have no idea about
I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought it was 35.
Yeah,
I thought it gave 35.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so you can
That's
buy a book and you just upgrade it straight up to 40.
That's
So
yeah.
it's a
Resources
huge big deal.
are not
Like, so
great.
AK farming on your alts is not even going to be a thing anymore. And I think that's a huge, much better than what they have right now.
So yeah, I
it's,
agree, but there's like the problem is just like the dissonance between legendaries and like when you have legendaries working the way that they work right now, and then
Yeah.
you have like artifact power the way that it's working right now. It is so hard to have alts and actually perform on them and like experience the game on a bunch of different characters. And there are a large amount of players that do play that way. I happen to be one of them. So I just feel like the system does need to change in that regard. Like, I understand the idea that, like, you can't have... I would love this, but yeah, you can't really have artifact power be, like account-wide, right? Like, you can't, like, every time you dump in, like, 100 mil, like, it goes to all of your classes, right? Because that would probably make alts too powerful. But in the same breath, when I log on to, like, a new mage, right? And all of a sudden it doesn't have any legendaries, so I just like I can't perform at the right level. It's just hard to have both of those systems working against your alts.
Well, it's
Yeah.
the barrier to entry, and the barrier to entry now is bigger now than it probably has been since Burning Crusade. Like, back in Burning Crusade Vanilla, it took such an exorbitant amount of time to even level a character to max level. It was basically the same as farming out your legendaries and your AP. But ever since then, in Wrath and going forward, leveling up characters and getting them geared up was a pretty transparent process. You would get your character to max level, and then you would get a gear, and you were done. But now you have like all these tertiary systems like the AP, the AK, and the legendary system. I think there's probably like one or two other ones I'm not thinking of. Prestige system if you're doing PvP, and so you have to unlock those honor talents at the beginning. And so you have all these extra barriers to entry for people to play alts. So not only are people that like to play alts like probably not doing it as much, but people who might consider it don't want to because of how much extra effort they have to invest into it.
Yeah.
So I feel like the legendary system probably, if there's anything that they don't take forward into the next expansion, I would really hope it was the legendary system. I feel like it's done nothing positive for the game. That's been pure cancer ever since the beginning.
Well, I do hope that style of gear stays in the game. I actually really like the style of
like the gear that
effects,
that has like different effects.
Yeah, and it's interchangeable and like it allows you to play your class in a different way. I really do like that. Like the Diablo style.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I like that. That's great. I
that's-
think everybody liked that. And that was the idea behind it at the beginning, and I thought, oh wow, this is great. The problem though is that there's always going to be the best one, right? And whenever there is the best one, then everybody needs to have that best one, or they're kind of competing at a disadvantage.
Well,
and how does
yeah,
it feel
exactly.
to be at a numerical disadvantage because you got unlucky?
Yeah.
I mean that
Sure.
doesn't really seem fun at all.
I
But-
just want legendaries to be a privilege again. Like I guess yeah, the word privilege. Like when it's
Well,
super.
I feel
rare.
like what they should do is they need to add like some level of extra difficulty, like another level of item rarity for like very high mythic gear or something like that does have those types of affixes on it. Like if you remember in Dragon Soul, they had like those trinkets that did all that weird stuff. They're adding some more of those in TOS. And then also you had, whenever you kill Deathwing, you'd get those weapons that gave all these cool different affixes. Like you had Rack the Rack, the thing that would put dots on everybody, I think, or it hit everything. And then you had Girthalak that would summon the tentacles and that kind of stuff. If they had that for like Mythic only, that had like maybe a little bit extra stuff to it, I think that would be interesting, and just kind of making gear more interesting without necessarily making it random. I feel like Blizzard's solution to players and things getting stale is to just make it more random and just make it to where you can't really depend on anything.
And also, the systems that you mentioned are very like linear. Like, I am working towards this, and even if I only have a chance for it to drop, this is what I target to get this item, to get this reward that I want. The feeling that I really can't stand with the legendary system right now is when I log onto my alts, it's like, well, I need to get the caches because I feel like I've gotten every legendary from World Quest caches. So then I get in this terrible feedback loop where I've just logged on like 8 different tunes. It's 3 o'clock in the morning and all I've done is World Quests. And it's like, how did I allow myself to do this again? Because it's really easy, because with that random like Skinner box like feedback loop that legendaries can be, when I open a cache and I see a legendary in it, it's like, I want to keep opening these caches. This is my best chance. And
I've never felt that way at all.
I have no idea.
Not even the slightest.
Yeah, I got 2 legendaries from Arena. I got 1 from RBGs. I got 1 from my Mythic Cache. I got 1 from Mythic Boss. I got 1 from normal mode, and then I also got I got 1 from the relinquished tokens. So I got mine pretty like spread out.
Yeah.
Through
See,
everywhere.
I get them in caches all the time, but the thing is the reason I'm probably getting them in caches is because I'm probably doing more caches than you guys, because I got legendaries in there. You know what I mean?
I've gotten legendaries out of caches too. I think I've gotten 2 or 3. I think total across all my characters, I have something like almost 20 legendaries, right? So it's, I mean, I've gotten plenty of them. I got one of them from RBGs last night, actually.
Nice.
So
I've got 15 plus out of caches.
It's a shitty one.
I've got 15 plus out of caches.
I just got a shitty legendary. I love that.
I think a big part of the legendaries is I really don't mind the legendaries, but I think that it should be targeted. I think that it should be like there is kind of a time gate in getting the legendaries and like working towards it and doing as many legendary chances as possible. You know, whatever works. But I feel like being able to choose like the best ones, for example, like the relinquished token, I got my legendary Frost BIS bracers off of a relinquished token. So having some ability to target the best ones and really like making that a profitable way to spend your time, I feel like that is a better way to go about the legendary system, as opposed to everybody putting in the same amount of time and effort and a quarter or 10% of them being rewarded with the best legendary. Like
that's the problem, really, is that there's not merit-based rewards. I think that's been a problem in the game. In Legion, that's been probably one of the biggest things, is that the amount of time and effort that you put into the game doesn't necessarily translate into the amount of rewards that you get out of it. So you can go and you can kill a mythic boss, and then you can get an item, and then you can go kill a normal mode boss, and an item can Titan Forge to be better than your mythic item. And it's the same with PvP. You know, you can get your weekly cache, and then you can get a 905 piece, and you can do a random game and get a 915. And having more of those merit-based rewards and things that correlate more with effort and investment and maybe skill as well, I think would be better for players and make them feel better about spending their time. I think whenever you have all these random rewards and everything, people at certain points kind of just get tired of it. And it's like they ask themselves, and this is something I'd never really asked myself, is like, why am I doing this? Why am I playing this game? Why am I putting this effort into it whenever I don't really have a clear goal? And I think giving players that clear goal, the value of that goal is better than giving people some sort of like a random system. And I completely agree that they should have had targeted legendaries right from the beginning. Whenever they announced legendaries actually at BlizzCon, they specifically said that they would be targeted. And whenever that was announced, I thought, okay, this is going to be cool. You're going to have to do like Halls of Valor and like do Halls of Valor a bunch of times to get a warrior like legendary helmet or something. And I was like, all right, fine. And then they got rid of that right at the end of, I think, alpha or beta. And so that was never even a thing anymore. And I think that was really the turning point where the legendary system went from being something that could be cool and change gameplay like the Diablo legendaries to just like this artificial gating system that has created all of these other problems that honestly have been probably, like, did you guys see about the rings that they're adding in 7.25?
Yeah, where it offers you an extra talent.
So the rings in 7.25, pretty interesting. I don't know if you guys play Diablo, but there's Hellfire Amulets, and Hellfire Amulets give you a random, it's not going to be random in WoW, but they give you a random talent. So what these things are going to do is they're going to be rings, and all of the rings had like the suffix or like the word at the end of it for whatever your class order hall title would be. So like for warriors, it was a battle lord. For mages, it'd be the archmage. For druids, it's archdruid, and you know, the hunter and death knight. I forgot the nether ward for the warlocks. So people kind of assumed that this would be a reward from the class order hall, and it turns out they're just going to be more random drop legendaries, which is really, really disappointing.
That got officially announced?
Yes, it did, and it was met with pretty much universally negative feedback.
Yeah. I mean, that's like obvious that that's gonna happen. Like, I don't know how that even makes it through like the, you know, like the approval process.
Change, right? So I mean, like, it maybe making.
Well, yeah, I mean, they could change it. What I'd really like to see, I don't know why it's not a capstone reward for completing all the class order hall content. I really don't understand why they wouldn't do that. It's called the Ring of the Battle Lord, and you get it from a bear. No, you should get it from Odin. Like, what are you talking about? That would that would actually make sense.
It's also nice for alts too, right? Like,
well, it's good for alts. It's good for progression. It's like you can log on and you can work at it, and you can know whenever I'm done with this, I can actually get this legendary ring. And it's not time gated in the same way that the legendary system was for Mists of Pandaria and Warlords of Draenor, because you don't have to go through and farm LFR a dozen times to get shitty little signets or sigils or whatever. And I would love to see that added in, and it would be amazing.
And now if they're really good now, like, people feel like just like they're behind because like it got added to the pool and they want to get it.
Well, that's the thing. It's like they're adding more things to the pool. There's always going to be a best legendary, and that best legendary, even if having it and not having it isn't that big of a difference, the feeling that you have that you're artificially at this disadvantage because Blizzard just decided that you suck, that doesn't make anybody feel good.
And I think the one cool thing is like, okay, different legendaries are really good in different situations. Like, that's great. When you don't have access to that utility, it doesn't feel good. Like, on my mage, I got the belt, for example. I just rolled a new mage. I've been playing him a lot. Get the belt. The belt's awesome for Mythic Plus. I don't really want it if I'm not doing Mythic Plus, you know? And the thing is like, I like that belt. I like that it makes me play the game in a different way, but at the end of the day, I feel like shit because I didn't get the bracers. Out of curiosity, Mike, were you actually targeting, like, just getting a bunch of relinquish tokens over and over again for your wrists to make sure?
No, I was just bored. I don't know. I just like the wrist, and I was like, hey, I wonder if this actually like works if you target legendaries. And I clicked it. I actually got it like right after asking. I was like super random. I was like, oh,
really?
That's awesome.
Yeah, I guess it does work.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the legendary system had a lot of potential to be cool, but whenever you just have like these random rewards, I really just feel like Blizzard needs to get away from that mindset of just randomly giving people rewards and allow people to actually work for things again. And that's something that's gone now, and I feel like it's been really bad for the game.
I agree with you, but I also think if they want to include the randomness, like if they really want to keep those random elements in the game, there just has to be a way that's not bad luck protection to fight it. Like, if like I am playing really hard, I am progressively working towards this, not because days have passed, I have bad luck protection that will make my luck slightly better over and over and over again. Like, when we talk about Titan forging and all of that, it's like, oh, okay, maybe if we got 2 pieces of the same piece of gear, we could throw them into the Obliterum Forge, and then it would Warforge, and I could keep Warforging over and over again. That way you can fight the bad luck. I don't mind some random dude who is like playing WoW, even if he's a complete terrible human being who never plays the game, and he logs on once and gets the legendary and it makes his day. That's fine if he randomly gets that. It doesn't affect me at all. But when I'm playing a bunch and I don't randomly get the legendary, even if I do, yeah, really cool, but I want to be able to work towards it, clear, delineated path.
I just feel like they're trying to reinvent the wheel. It's like, you kill really hard bosses and you get really good gear. You do really high rated PvP and you get really good PvP gear. Like, why do you have to what's wrong with that? Like, that makes sense. Everything works. Like, maybe you have a little bit of randomness with lower level gear and you can upgrade it maybe. Why do you have to reinvent the wheel? What, is somebody going to quit the game if they can't get a max level item from a world quest? Of course not. It's ridiculous to me. I don't see. Yeah, I mean, like, what? You're gonna fucking collect nuts and kill squirrels and you're gonna get the best helmet in the game? This is insane. You think about it. I mean, come on, what is this? Like, the game, it was fine. You kill Mythic Archimon, you get the really good sword. Now you've got the really good sword. Everybody's happy. You know, you don't have to have the best gear in the whole game if you're not doing really hard content. Why does that even need to be a thing?
Yeah.
It's just, it's Skinner box behavior, and I am tired of it. I don't want it. I don't think anybody does. Whenever they introduce any other element of this, universally it's met with negative feedback. Why? Why do they keep doing it? I don't understand.
I will say though, is just like I totally agree with a good amount of what you're saying.
Yeah.
But on the reinventing the wheel thing, I do think the best thing about Legion, even when it did like fall on its face a little bit, is just the idea of we're gonna try a bunch of new stuff, because I do think a lot of the new things that were added into the game were enjoyable and didn't deviate too far from what was good. Like, the idea of legendary gear, even though like right now I'm like on the record saying it just can't drop the way that it drops now, I like the idea that that gear exists. And if we move into the next expansion and there is gear that you obtain from maybe targeting one dungeon or doing like the artifact thing, like maybe if that gave a piece of gear instead or something like that, like doing things like that and then getting gear that affects your character in the way the current legendaries do, the system was worth it, right? The game moved forward, it advanced, it got better.
I agree with you on that element. I think that them trying new things and doing new stuff is more important than them kind of just doing what they've always done, which is, I mean, that is an argument against what I'm saying, right? If you want to innovate, you want to change, and you want to ultimately improve, you have to think outside the box. But that doesn't mean that anything you do outside that box is a good thing. So, go ahead, dude.
I saw that Skype chat like a little while ago, and like at one point, I went and I just started talking for a really long time, and I wanted that to be
just expecting him to go,
and I was just gonna keep talking until he got back, and it was like nothing's gone. But yeah, we're gonna let Mike go to the bathroom really quick, but gonna take that as an opportunity to remind you guys we're starting to get towards the end part of the show. So if you have any questions for us, you can tweet them out at #allcraft, and we will, or you can actually @allcraftshow. And we will do our best to answer all of those questions as they start coming in now. So just send them in throughout the show, and then at the end of the show, we will actually answer them.
What I wanted them to do with legendaries is, this is like an idea I had, is that what if like, you know, mythic level bosses had a chance to have like some of the items that they drop actually be legendary, right? So if you kill Blackhand on mythic, and there's a chance that you can actually get the Blackhand mace as a legendary, right? And it was just a completely new item, like kind of exactly how Illidan was with the Warglaves. So you would have more items like this, like the, I use another example from like Sunwell, like from Kil'jaeden, like the Crown of Asterion, who, you know, was like one of the main like Blood Elf like princes or kings or something. And if you got this as like the legendary, it would have like maybe a couple of extra affixes or something like that, and it would do something cool. And I think that just making gear more unique is definitely a cool thing. But whenever it's just completely random, and I don't think people really feel rewarded whenever they get a legendary. I think that whenever you get something that you didn't necessarily work for, I guess like the act of getting it and the instance of getting it doesn't really feel that good, right? Whenever I got the legendary on my Warlock for being dead during Star Augur, that doesn't really make me feel like, oh wow, I'm amazing, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh cool, I got a legendary.
And I'm not gonna remember it in, like I'm not.
Well, because you're not invested into it. If you don't, if you don't have people invested into something, emotionally invested into something, they're not going to remember it at all. They're not going to care. And just giving people random rewards based on nothing, that's not merit based, that you don't work towards, you're just randomly given, doesn't make people feel like they're spending their time in a positive manner. It's just they're playing a Skinner box slot machine until they play the game.
I did just remember what my first legendary was. I got Safuz, and and I tweeted out like I like instantly tweeted out like, dude, what the fuck, and then just posted the picture of Safuz, and like I think it was like 3 of the other casters all tweeted back with a picture of Safuz. We just all got Safuz. It was like a curse, man.
I was so happy, and like my reaction was like, oh shit, an orange. And then like I see it, I was like, oh, I mean,
Like,
it's all right. And then like the whole comment
Bro, you got
section,
yours out of a treasure box. Like, I don't want to hear it. Like, SOP. Literally just walked over and picked it up out of a treasure box. Like, oh, look, it's orange.
Wait, Alan got. Oh my god.
I
That's
got
video
like
of it.
not even a big treasure box, a small
I mean,
one.
Put it on
mine's just
YouTube.
as dumb. Mine's just as dumb. I mean, I've gotten like easily 15 plus legendaries out of World Quest caches, but maybe even more. Because I mean, I play a lot of alts, and like I said, I'll just go on the alts and I'll knock out all the World Quest. The one nice thing about World Quest that's actually like really nice, like I'm on my work laptop right now. It's a real piece of crap. Like it's really it only exists so I can like watch Twitch videos like while I'm on the road and like practice, and it can World Quest fine. So like my flight got canceled when I was in Ukraine after a WoW tournament, and I was able to World Quest, and I got a legendary when I was in Ukraine.
There you go, dude.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, people getting legendaries from Blingtron 6000.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that could actually happen. That's real life now. That's the game.
Many people do. Actually, like,
Yeah.
you guys know Lore?
Yeah.
He got his
Like-
BIS legendary out of Blink.
What the fuck, man?
Yeah, it's crazy. But anyways, I'd love to hear more thoughts on like TOS and kind of the future of, like, I guess like the short-term future. Like we've got TOS coming out, we got 7.2.5 out pretty soon. Some cross design changes, new season. What are you guys' goals for that?
Do TOS and get a lot of really good gear. That's my goal. That's the goal every time.
Just killed the boss.
No, I don't care about killing the boss. I just want the gear. I mean, like, if I have to kill the boss to get the gear, then I guess I'll do that.
I mean,
But I just want to get the gear.
you can kill normal mode bosses and get the gear if you want.
I'm planning on that. Yeah, that's what's gonna happen probably. But yeah, I mean, I definitely want to do that. Arms wearers are getting overhauled, so they're gonna be a lot better. I would say overall, a lot of big changes to their talents and everything. So that's gonna be pretty interesting to see how that all plays out. I'm pretty excited to see in general like how the raid is gonna go. I'm actually really excited to see the Fallen Avatar Sargeras fight. That's, of all of them, what I'm kind of interested in. And also the Kil'jaeden fight to a certain different degree, because I'm not really sure what's going to happen after in the Kil'jaeden fight, because whenever you saw the cinematic, Kil'jaeden was obviously not very happy with Sargeras and what had happened. So we could see some sort of like a tragic hero turn in the same way that you had with Illidan, but to maybe a lesser extent as like a final act of good where he like betrays Sargeras